after that, we have delivered numerous judgments which have gone against the government.
So you think you have effectively stood up to the power of the executive over the last 8 years?
Well, of course, I'm sure, and not me, just individually. See, the court is not just one Chief Justice.
I understand.
It comprises of a collectivity of people. Even the cases which I decided, you discussed the outcomes with your colleagues on the bench, and I do believe that our court has stood up. Well, there's one thing which I have said before, and I'd like to again say, the role of the judiciary in a democratic society is not the role of the opposition in Parliament. We are here to decide cases
and to defend the Constitution.
Defend the Constitution and act in accordance with the rule of law.
As a final question, you have said since retiring that you have a great confidence in the stability of India, the inclusivity of India, and the durability of Indian democracy. Are you sure that confidence isn't complacency?
Well, I'm confident about it for the simple reason that over 75 years of our history, the trials and tribulations of a modern nation, of a new nation, our nation has emerged as a mature democracy.
Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud, thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. 3 minutes to 6 o'clock, and we're here until 8:37 with your morning show. If you need us in the morning commute, 788-3093 is the number to call. We do have extreme cold warnings today, and this does today include the city of Winnipeg. It extends across most of southern Manitoba up into Selkirk as well, and into the southeast and to the west. Brandon, Killarney, Melita, Verdon, Dauphin, all through Riding Mountain. Another cold day ahead. So cold wind chills, bundle up out there and get ready for the day. Today, nice, clear and sunny in Winnipeg and a high of minus 19. Let's say good morning to the team. Good morning to Corey Funk, who's here directing the program and will be covering the commute on the air. Good morning to Abby Adiyemi, who's in our control room behind the controls. Abby's our technical producer and will be covering the forecasts. And good morning to Kevin Ipatebo, who is our YouTube producer. Hi, Kev. And you might be watching on YouTube today. And I encourage you, if you're listening and you haven't checked out our YouTube stream, it's really fun to watch the show as well, because so often our stories that you hear have, their visual components as well. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our CBC News Centre this morning with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba plans to launch a public inquiry into Winnipeg's police headquarters project. The city spent $214 million buying an old Canada Post complex and converting it into a home for Winnipeg police. The project went $79 million over budget, prompting 2 audits. The Premier, according to a source, will announce an inquiry today. And a new bus service rolls into northern Manitoba this spring. That region's been without bus service to Winnipeg since last year. NCN Thompson Bus Lines says its service will connect 5 northern communities with Winnipeg. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So Heather's with us, of course, throughout the morning. World Report's coming up, the latest in national and international news. Of course, you can imagine we're still talking about the tariffs that were made official yesterday after we got off the air. U.S. President Donald Trump saying they will begin in March. This is 25% on steel and aluminum. To that end, we're going to take you to one of the steel towns in Manitoba later this morning. We just confirmed the mayor of Selkirk will be on our program, so stay tuned for that. And we have much more coming up as well. So we'll tell you all about it after World Report at 6.
On Cue with Tom Power. The Canadian stand-up comedian Darcy Michaels spent 20 years searching for an audience until he and his husband Jer Bear went viral on TikTok. Now they have 2 new streaming specials where they open up about their love story and how going viral changes your relationship.
See, I got you something too. A Costco membership.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he is coordinating with world leaders to respond to new U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs. Trudeau is in Paris for an AI summit, and as Olivia Stefanovich reports, he had an opportunity this morning to send a message directly to the Trump administration.
As usual, these summits are a great opportunity to speak with a range of leaders.
Moments after the Prime Minister made those comments to reporters in Paris, a senior federal government official says Justin Trudeau got in a word with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance.
We will stand up for Canadian workers. We will stand up for Canadian industries.
The official says Trudeau mentioned the impact steel tariffs will have in Ohio, Vance's home state, among Canada's largest markets, and one of the states where U.S. President Donald Trump wants to revive steelmaking. Trudeau did not announce retaliatory measures today, but he warned Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports will drive up costs for Americans. Trudeau says Canada will work with the Trump administration over the coming weeks to highlight the consequences the tariffs could have on both sides of the border. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Paris.
For more on the response from Canada's politicians, let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, these steel and aluminum tariffs do not come into effect until March. What happens between then and now?
Marcia, this reinstatement of tariffs under the pretense of a national security threat was premised on there having been a surge of unfair imports that resulted in mill closures and underutilized U.S. facilities. However, in the president's own order, there's a statistic that suggests that this increase, for example, of aluminum from Canada, has happened at a rate actually less than the increase in U.S. consumption over the last 8 to 10 years. This may be a good argument for Canada to make to get this pulled off in the next couple of weeks. The relatively low exchange rate right now could also offset some of the extra cost of Canadian exports into the U.S. As Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet pointed out on social media last night, there may not be a major effect, for example, on mills in his province. The U.S. could just be bringing inflation on itself here. If that argument doesn't carry the day, retaliation could be coming. François-Philippe Champagne last night said Canada's response this time will be clear, calibrated, but also coordinated with other countries that are getting hit. That may take a bit of time. The $30 billion list released last week of potential U.S. products to hit with counter tariffs, that falls just short of what would be a dollar-for-dollar retaliation for these new metal tariffs. So we'll watch to see if additional moves are now deemed appropriate.
And a key part of all of this effort to stop the tariffs, as the Premier is going to Washington today, what can you tell us about that?
Well, they too will be carrying the message that the White House here is inflicting self-harm. David Eby last night pointing out that the aluminum smelter in his province exports a unique commodity that Americans don't make themselves.
They're taxing themselves. They're going to have to buy it from us, or they'll have to buy it from someone else, and it will all be subject to the tariff.
There are premiers who remain apprehensive about retaliation. We'll watch to see if any premiers double back to their threats from last week now, pull U.S. booze off the shelves again, cancel contracts to pile on to the federal response.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. While Donald Trump was signing executive orders yesterday, he also took aim at paper straws.
These things don't work. I've had them many times, and on occasion, they break, they explode. If something's hot, they don't last very long, like a matter of minutes. And I don't think that plastic's going to affect a shark very much as they're munching their way through the ocean.
The U.S. president signed an executive order rolling back a Biden administration policy. It was designed to phase out federal purchases of single-use plastics, including straws, by 2035. Less than 10% of plastic waste is currently recycled. The rest takes hundreds of years to break down, and researchers have found microplastics in every corner of the planet, including inside the bodies of animals and humans. U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing the legal limits of his presidential powers as he signed a new batch of executive orders. A judge was ruling against his federal funding freeze for the second time. It is the latest in a long list of rulings against the Trump administration. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh joins me now from Washington. And Cameron, what can you tell us?
Well, it's just day 23. President Trump has signed nearly 60 executive orders, which allow him to guide the government but not create his own laws. Now, his edicts have included tariffs, crackdowns on illegal immigration, halting foreign aid, and a broad freeze on federal spending. Courts have already blocked several of them, including dismantling of USAID and withholding government funds, yet Trump is pushing ahead. Senator Chris Murphy is a Democrat from Connecticut.
This is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced, certainly since Watergate. The president is attempting to seize control of power and for corrupt purposes. The president wants to be able to decide how and where money is spent so that he can reward his political friends, he can punish his political enemies. That is the evisceration of democracy.
Lawsuits are pouring in while Vice President J.D. Vance took to X, suggesting judges do not have authority over the Trump administration's executive power.
So who can limit executive orders?
Well, historically, courts and Congress. The question is, how much can Trump change unilaterally, including Elon Musk's revamping of government? Charlie Dent is a former Republican congressman.
I suspect there is going to be some kind of a constitutional crisis. At the very least, there'll be a challenge because the Supreme Court will have to rule, can the president eliminate programs without any input or guidance from Congress? And I suspect the answer to that question is going to be no. And certainly Elon Musk doesn't have the authority to do it.
Some worry courts and Congress can't act fast enough. Take USAID. On Friday, a court blocked an order putting staffers on leave. Yet when employees showed up for work Monday, most returned away. Marcia?
Thank you, Cameron.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Cameron McIntosh in Washington. U.S. President Donald Trump is ramping up pressure on Jordan's King Abdullah to accept more Palestinian refugees from Gaza, perhaps permanently, if Trump follows through on his proposal to redevelop the territory. Trump hosts Abdullah at the White House later today. He has also ordered Hamas to release all Israeli hostages by noon on Saturday. Hamas has suspended the release of any more hostages. Nishnawbe First Nation is worried political instability in Ottawa could undermine its effort to get a new water treatment plant. It's been under a boil water advisory for 30 years. And leaders of the Ojibwe community in Northern Ontario have been advocating for years to get a permanent fix. Sarah Law has the story.
It has been traumatic for Nishnawbe people. I mean, there's just been so many negative impacts.
Chris Muniz is chief of Nishnawbe First Nation in northwestern Ontario. As of February 1st, the community's 350 members have lacked access to clean drinking water for 3 decades.
Well, it's a lack of political will from the government, so that's the way I feel.
Nearly $30 million in upgrades haven't fixed the problems at the water plant. Muniz says the facility is producing clean water, it's just not getting to people's homes. He says a new plant is the only solution, costing about $52 million. Patty Haidu is the federal minister of Indigenous Services.
About 6 months ago, I provided Nishnawbe a commitment to the beginning of thinking about the design of a new plant.
In 2015, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised to end Canada's long-term drinking water advisories in 5 years. A decade later, 33 long-term advisories remain. Now that he's resigned, Muniz questions what happens to that pledge. Engineering professor Carrie Black at the University of Calgary says the issue must be prioritized no matter who's in power.
So stop politicizing it. Stop making it a volleyball that you bat between different political parties.
Muniz says he submitted a project approval request a few weeks ago for a new plant. He's already calling on Canada's next prime minister to take quicker action to help his community. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Canada's top musical acts find out today if they're nominated for Juno Awards.
I don't want to die for them to miss me. Yes, I see the things that they wishing on me.
We already know Boy Wonder will receive the International Achievement Award. The Toronto producer has worked with some of the biggest names in rap, including Drake. The full list of this year's nominees will be announced around midday. The award show will be hosted by Michael Bublé on March 30th in Vancouver.
Might go down to G.O.D. Yeah, wait. I go hard on Southside G. Yeah, wait.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
It's a lot of bad things that they wish and they wish and they wish and they wish and they wish on me.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Extreme cold warning in effect. That does include Winnipeg. Everything's creaking out there. When you walk in the snow, you can hear that squeakiness this morning. Clear sky in the city of Winnipeg currently, and we'll get into our forecast in a moment, but the current temperature is minus 27. Still ahead on this hour of the program, or I should say ahead on this hour of the program, we're going to dig into that global AI summit in Paris that Justin Trudeau was at, and we're going to explore how governments can set effective boundaries as tech giants are battling for dominance in the rapidly evolving industry of AI. So stay tuned. We will lean into that conversation. In addition, this hour on the program, we're going to be hearing more about what is happening on the political scene in Ottawa. Ryan Tumulty is here with Ottawa Report. So, of course, part of that discussion, a big part, is going to be around the response to tariffs. Heather Wallace is in right now with our local headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney says U.S. President Donald Trump's comments about Canada are so insulting they should not be repeated. Trump has mused about making Canada the 51st state. Carney addressing that desire as he spoke to several hundred Liberal supporters at Winnipeg's King's Head pub last night. He likens it to a sort of Voldemort of comments, a villain so dangerous in Harry Potter novels his name must not be spoken. And a Winnipeg towing company is suing the city and its deputy mayor, alleging they reneged on a contract. Tartan Towing had won a contract to tow Winnipeg police vehicles last August. A few months later, after Deputy Mayor Janice Lukes raised questions, the city announced it would reopen that contract to new bids. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
I want to mention coming up later in the program, this built on something we had on the show yesterday, so I'm just going to mention it. We had a two-part feature interview with a nurse who we concealed her identity to safeguard her job. But she's a frontline worker. She's worked for decades, including time in HSC's ER and the front lines there. So she gave us quite a look inside what the realities of her work are. However, one of the things she brought up was why one day did everything go so smoothly in terms of the ER just opened up. People were sent and didn't come back. They were sent, presumably, she said, up to wards or transferred. Some were discharged. But the day that we're talking about is the Code Orange that happened in January. Of course, very unusual to have these called. They are called, but they happened during, in this case, a blizzard event. So the point is you have to clear things out in case patients come. In the end, HSC didn't receive patients from that day, but she wondered what the process was in place to make that happen. So we're going to dig specifically into that today. So a little bit later on the program, we have the Chief Operating Officer for Health Sciences Centre that's going to join us to talk about Code Orange and the process and specifically what goes on in those situations and whether or not there's lessons on those days that could be applied to more the day in and day out of the operations of ERs. HSC and otherwise. So we're going to learn more about Code Orange a little bit later in the program. Right now, it is 6:13. It is time to hear more about Code White, which is freezing, frigid, everything icy out there. Right? Abby Adeyemi's back this morning. Hi, Abby.
Good morning. It's a cold one across board today. And looking at conditions down south, we do have warnings in effect for southern Manitoba due to that extreme cold warning, which is in effect. Temperatures will stay very low with wind chills reaching minus 40 or even colder this morning. It may warm up slightly during the day, but this extreme cold will return overnight, creating dangerously low wind chill values near minus 40, and you might even see it get to minus 44. So frostbite can occur in these conditions. I just advise you stay safe and bundle up. Looking at conditions in Winnipeg at this time, temperatures hovering around minus 27, minus 28. We do have clear skies. We have lots of sunshine in the forecast today, but don't let that fool you. It's not as warm as it's going to be. That wind chill is still going to stay with us. Our high for today will be around minus 19. With the wind chill factored in for Winnipeg, it will be feeling like minus 40. So I'll just advise you, bundle up. The sun will not be warming things up much today.
It's classic, right? We get the pretty days. It's always coldest on clear, beautiful days.
I stepped stepped out this morning and I felt it was I felt the pain slap me. I wish I could explain, but it was painful.
I know it's stinging, right? It's stinging. All right, it's that kind of day. Let's get into the commute. Hopefully, it's going to be a bit better. It was kind of quiet till the end of the show yesterday, Corey.
Yeah, and still fairly quiet so far this morning. Haven't heard anything. But if you're out there, you see something going on, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's dig into the AI Action Summit that wraps up today in Paris, France. As you've been hearing, world leaders are there from more than 80 countries. They're talking about the safe development of AI and how to make it inclusive. Francis Sims is here to talk about that, an Associate Dean of Faculty of Applied Sciences and Technology at Humber Polytech. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So it's interesting, this idea of, looking at making AI safer and more inclusive. What's at stake here, do you think?
So governments for a few years now, and I think this is the third AI summit, have been trying to wrap their arms around what it means to govern and use AI ethically and responsibly. Trudeau has highlighted that AI should not just be for the oligarchs and for the oligarchs to make money off of. It should be available and accessible to everybody, which is great and important. Part of the challenge is that these AI tools are being built like big tech builds products. Which means they're being done by companies out of Silicon Valley and now in China and Europe and Canada. But their challenge is that right now AI is a nice to have. In maybe 5 years, when you go to the doctor's office and they compare your X-ray across everybody in Canada, that becomes a must-have, right? And so if it's a must-have, then you need to make sure that the data that's being used to make decisions represents everybody, that it's affordable, right? And you can power it, right? Because one of the challenges with AI is that an AI data center can consume more power than an entire city in Canada.
So I'm going to interject there because obviously, Canada, it could be positioned to be able to have some of that power, exploring clean energy. When you think about that, I'm sitting in a province that's full of hydropower, of course. I'm wondering what you think Canada's role should be in shaping AI policy at the summit and maybe what role it could play in the future of that development. Where's our opportunity?
Yeah, so Canada is going to take over the G7 presidency shortly, and so that's a platform for influence, right? I imagine, especially with the likes of like Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, coming out of Canada, Canada has an opportunity to lead from a framework and governance development perspective. Trudeau has said that Canada is a trustworthy AI partner. So I think Trudeau will try to, use Canada as sort of the starting point to build these frameworks. But gaining support and influence across the world is going to be difficult, especially with the likes of like J.D. Vance, who came to the summit, the vice president of the U.S., and said that regulation cannot get in the way of innovation. And that echoes what Elon Musk said last year at another summit. So Trudeau is going to try to encourage other nations around the world to sort of, implement ethical and responsible solutions. But it's going to be a challenge to get everybody on board.
Do you think that the summit itself will lead to stronger international collaboration, or did it serve more, given the current climate, and especially what's coming out of the United States? You mentioned J.D. Vance and Elon Musk. Did it serve more to raise maybe red flags about the biggest concerns that should be on the table globally, as you've outlined?
Yeah, I think what we'll see cooperation around is how AI is used in particular sectors. For example, healthcare, so that when you walk into a doctor's office, you know that the data represents Canadians and the people in your community and who you are. And also it's affordable. So instead of, the doctor used to paying $1,000 to get that X-ray compared with everybody across the country, it costs $1. And so I think that's where the influence will start to come in. I don't think we're going to see governance across every sector, but how AI is used in areas that are already regulated by governments such as healthcare, I think is where we're going to start to see things, maybe in terms of energy, maybe in terms of, policing and surveillance. Those are the areas where I think we'll start to see the rules. How AI is used to write your essay and your resume, that may still stay the same way because it's going to be difficult for them to regulate and govern everything. Thank you so much for the analysis of the summit. Appreciate your time this morning. My pleasure. Thank you.
That's Francis Sims, an Associate Dean of the Faculty of Applied Sciences and Technology at Humber Polytechnic. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Paris, as we've been hearing on World Report, attending this AI Action Summit. President Donald Trump's new 25% steel and aluminum tariffs, though, meant he couldn't give the issue his full attention. Trudeau, just to stay with this for a second here, calls the tariffs unjustified. Pardon me, quote, entirely unjustified is the quote. He did speak, the Prime Minister, yesterday, though he was at this summit. He did take a moment to respond to the tariff situation. Here's what he said.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified. We are the U.S.'s closest ally. Our economies are integrated. Canadian steel and aluminum is used in a number of key American industries, whether it's defense, shipbuilding, manufacturing, energy, automotive. Together we make North America more competitive. We will be working with the American administration over the coming weeks to highlight the negative impacts on Americans and Canadians of these unacceptable tariffs. But we'll also be working with our international partners and friends. And if it comes to that, our response, of course, will be firm and clear. We will stand up for Canadian workers, we will stand up for Canadian industries, and more Canadians will stand up for each other. This is a moment of pride, this is a moment of pulling together, this is a moment for Canada to be solid in our identity, in our sovereignty, and in our presence for our friends and neighbors.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking from Paris, where he's attending the AI Summit, but responding to the tariff situation as it continues to develop. Speaking of stories that are developing, still ahead in our program in the second hour here, about 500 people come to work at the steel mill in Selkirk every day. We're going to hear from the city's mayor now that the steel heading to the States from that space has a 25% tariff that's been slapped on it. So what are they thinking in Selkirk this morning? We'll find out in the next hour.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
The mayor of Selkirk's actually featured in a story in the Winnipeg Free Press today. The picture they have, he's wearing a hat. You might have seen him walking around town with it, or the city with it on. It says Canada is already great. Time right now, 6:22 a.m. It is in Winnipeg going to be a high -19 today. Lots of sunshine, and that means clear and cold, really cold. An extreme cold warning has been issued for most of southern Manitoba, also extends to the west, includes Brandon, includes Winnipeg, goes up through Riding Mountain. We're talking wind chills around -40 today. And having a look just at the conditions across the province right now, your cold spot, Shoal Lake at -34. Dauphin is your warm spot, if you can call -26 warm. Now you know why that warning's out there. But right now in the city of Winnipeg, we're sitting right around -27 degrees. Well, some music from Del Barber next. And if you're a fan, then you might know that you've got to get out and see Del Barber because he is putting touring life behind him. He's on his farewell tour, which wraps up with a show at Winnipeg's Park Theatre at the end of the month. So the show's on February 27th and 8th. But this morning, we want to take you back to 2009 and Del's first studio album, Where the City Ends. This tune's Love is Just a Wrecking Ball.
South, they're begging me to leave a home that has been built on these sharp shoulders. On a dark and frozen morning in the cave of February, Chicago calls and I can't, oh I can't pretend. If there ever was a way I could keep these boots moving without stirring up trouble like I always do, my feet, they found those landmines, and my heart's just a loaded gun. Desire's got his finger on the trigger, and he's asking about you. Got eyes as wide as Kansas, Arizona skin and dark Alaskan curls. Remember hers just lose the ground there steady. See, love is just a wrecking ball, and I am just a freak. Now revel in that chance, waltz with us along the shore. On a day of breakfast smiles and too much coffee. 'Cause I'm an old stubborn salmon, swimming just to die. She's got hooks sharp enough to catch me. She got eyes as wide as Kansas, Arizona skin and dark Alaskan curls. Remember, it's just lose the ground, lay it steady. See, love is just a wrecking ball, and I am just a fool. Now I'm building hopeful fires to keep her eyes off the ground, so she might see smoke rising in the north. 'Cause tonight I am the sun, the darkest winter's night. Oh, my darling, she is the daughter of the fall. Tonight I am the sun, the darkest winter's night. Oh, my darling, she is the daughter of the fall.
Del Barber with Love is Just a Wrecking Ball, and he's currently on his final tour. If you go to his Facebook page, it says Last Kick at the Can, and that's Love is Just a Wrecking Ball as mentioned. But the Last Kick at the Can show is coming up Friday, February 28th at the Park Theater. Doors open at 7 o'clock. The show's at 8. Tickets are available where you check out the Park Theater online.
CBC Music Live. Head into the big venues, intimate concert halls, and small stages. Celebrate live music the way it was meant to be. Share in an unmistakable energy of being shoulder to shoulder with music fans and face to face with some of Canada's best musicians.
It's such an honor and a pleasure to play here.
CBC Music Live, brand new season. And catch past episodes right now on CBC Gem.
It's an extreme cold warning today for most of southern Manitoba into the southeast and up through Riding Mountain in Park as well. So we're talking Dauphin, Brandon, Sprague, Steinbach, Dugald, Selkirk, Winnipeg, all of us with extreme cold conditions. Now, due to the cold wind chills, all buses in Rolling River School Division are canceled today. In addition, Brandon School Division is not going to operate buses outside the city of Brandon, so no rural buses in that division either. Well, if you have an issue in traffic, you can give us a call, 788-3093, speaking of all things commuting. So you can give Corey a call and let us know what it's like out there. Or if you're brave enough to be running or biking in the cold, come on, brag. I know you winter runners out there duct taping your shoes so the air doesn't get through the mesh and coming in with the eyelashes all crusted with the ice. I'd love a pic if you're out there and you're braving this today. You can email us, radio893@cbc.ca. But commuter line, please let us know if there's any issues out there. Coming up, we have business news on CBC Information Radio, and Kristalee Ramlichan will be back with our report this morning, as she is each and every day. Of course, we're talking tariffs today, so we'll talk about steel and aluminum. In addition, a group of investors led by Elon Musk has offered to buy the nonprofit that controls OpenAI for $97 billion. So we're going to hear more about this proposed business deal, of course, in the context of the interview we had in this half hour as well. Important to understand what's going on there. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's minus 27 degrees. Caught in a cold snap in Winnipeg, sunny but bitterly cold. Wind chills this morning approaching minus 40. Frostbite in minutes. Today's actual temperature will reach minus 19 this afternoon. And as Marcy mentioned, all of southern Manitoba is under that extreme cold warning. Manitoba plans to launch a public inquiry into Winnipeg's police headquarters project. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, this comes 8 years after a request from City Council.
Winnipeg spent $214 million buying an old Canada Post complex and converting it into a home for the Winnipeg Police Service. That project went $79 million over budget. It inspired 2 audits, an RCMP investigation, and civil lawsuits against a former chief administrator and dozens of construction firms. In 2017, City Council asked the project to launch a public inquiry into this project, as well as a series of other real estate and construction projects. At the time, the PC government refused, but the NDP made the inquiry an election promise. And that inquiry will be announced today, albeit at a scope limited to the police HQ. A source in the Canoe government says Labour lawyer Garth Smorang will serve as commissioner for the inquiry. It has a $2 million budget. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg towing company is suing the city and its deputy mayor, alleging they reneged on a contract. Tartan Towing won a contract to tow Winnipeg police vehicles last August. A few months later, after Deputy Mayor Janice Lukes raised questions, the city announced it would reopen the contract to new bids. Tartan claims the city unilaterally refused to negotiate with the company. It claims Lukes encouraged the breach with defamatory comments made to media. The company launched 2 other lawsuits naming Lukes last year. Lukes says she wouldn't comment on this third lawsuit, but says it is her job to ensure taxpayers are getting value for their dollars. The city of Winnipeg declined to comment while the matter is ongoing. None of the claims have been tested in court. A campaign is underway to get the White House to reverse course, but as it stands now, a 25% American tariff will be imposed on Canadian steel and aluminum as of March 12th.
If it comes to that, our response, of course, will be firm and clear. We will stand up for Canadian workers. We will stand up for Canadian industries.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying there will be a Canadian response to the Trump trade action. But first, Canada's premiers are in Washington for a joint lobbying effort aimed at convincing the Trump administration tariffs are not in their best interests. Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney says U.S. President Donald Trump's comments about Canada are so insulting they should not be repeated. Trump has repeatedly mused about making Canada the 51st state. Carney addressed that desire as he spoke to several hundred Liberal supporters at Winnipeg's King's Head pub last night.
Think about what's at stake in this ridiculous, insulting comments of the president of what we could be. This is by the way, I view this as the sort of Voldemort of comments. Like, I will not even repeat it, but you know what I'm talking about.
In the Harry Potter novels, Voldemort is a villain so dangerous his name must not be spoken. U.S. President Donald Trump is proposing a new deadline in Gaza for the Palestinian militant group Hamas to release the remaining Israeli hostages.
If all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out.
On Monday, Hamas said it would delay the release of the remaining hostages because it said Israel had broken the terms of the agreement. Israel accuses Hamas of breaking the deal. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Advocates for First Nations families say a class action settlement for people harmed by Canada's child welfare system is an important step forward. The $23 billion class action is for those who experienced racial discrimination through Ottawa's chronic underfunding of the First Nations Child and Family Services Program. People who were removed from their home communities and placed in Child and Family Services can start applying for compensation as early as March. Mary Burton is with Zungizi Ode. It's a group that works with Indigenous youth and families in Winnipeg.
Some people have to pay for their therapy or for their kids to get counseling. Whatever type of services they're looking for, they're not always free. So this compensation will help in those regards.
The settlement round deals with children who were removed from their First Nations homes between 1991 and 2022. Well, the Paw and 5 other northern Manitoba communities are going to be getting a new bus service this spring. NCN Thompson Bus Lines has announced a new route connecting those communities to Winnipeg. Dan Cannell is president of the Chamber of Commerce in the Paw and OCN. He says northern communities need this.
Our medical services are limited. We see them being reduced all the time. A lot of people more and more often are relying on medical services from Winnipeg, and now this provides another safe alternative for our community to be able to get down to Winnipeg for their appointments and back up to the north in safe manners.
The region's last bus service shut down last year, leaving locals scrambling to find transport to Winnipeg. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So, Heather Wells, I thought someone was maybe trying to break into the house this morning, in the back door. It wasn't, which is why I'm sharing this, but it was the sound was so sort of loud. I'm like, it sounds like someone's trying to force a door open. And then I kind of looked out. I have a peephole. I looked out and I realized my neighbor was leaving for work. And their car door was so frozen because
oh my goodness,
they have a car outside, right? That's what I was hearing was them trying to get their car open. Yeah. I know.
It's no laughing matter. I shouldn't be laughing.
We all have to laugh because otherwise we're going to freeze.
Do you know what? In my car, I park indoors, and as I'm driving to work and temperature's this cold, the drastic temperature change, you can hear the metal just cracking as you're driving. It's frightening.
I know. And then do you have the issue where you have a car thermometer maybe? And you can
it
see
plummets?
Yeah, you can just see it falling. It's like, oh, okay then.
That was fast.
I know. I'm a lightweight now with the garage. For years and years, I was up, as listeners probably know because I've shared it before, but scraping the windshield and out there, and that's the real stuff.
That is, you're hardy when you can do that,
right? Abby, I think you park outside still.
Yeah. And that, my friend, if you go to the car wash and you don't wipe the edges of the door well, you might have issues opening it up in the morning.
Yeah, there's
just
that
saying,
too.
Just adding that.
It is everything's creaky cold today. We keep mentioning this extreme temperature. So, what have we actually got for our forecast?
Yeah, this the province is actually cold, but we have this very cold warnings for the southern parts of the province, all the way down to the U.S. border and all the way down to the Saskatchewan border. We're going to be seeing wind chills around -40, and it might even get to -43 at some point. In Winnipeg, we are at -27 at this time. You look up, it's clear. You can still spot some stars up there and the beautiful moon. Expect plenty of sunshine today, but the wind chill will feel like -40 this morning, and then it might get to -27 in the afternoon and get back to around -40 overnight. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. Temperatures around -26 at this time. The wind chill will feel like -40 for folks in Morris, Morden, Winkler, all the way down to the U.S. border. Heading west to Brandon, -32. Clear conditions we're seeing. Sunshine in the forecast this morning. Some clouds will roll in late in the afternoon. Highs around -20. Wind chill make it feels like -42. And if we travel to Dauphin, we're seeing temperatures around -26 at this time. Mostly cloudy skies you're seeing. Expect some sunshine today, this afternoon. High around -19. Wind chill this morning. Colder, it's feeling like -48 already for folks in Dauphin. So bundle up. For the Interlake region, Gimli sitting around -31 at this time. Clear conditions also we have there. High for that part of the province, -19. rain. The wind chill this morning feels like minus 40. For the power, Flin Flon, Thompson, Churchill, temperatures hovering around minus 30, minus 31 at this time. Flin Flon seeing light snow similar in Thompson, but Churchill is seeing ice crystals. And the wind chill in that part of the province, actually, we're seeing it near minus 43 for those folks. So it's very cold across the province with that's extreme cold warnings covering Winnipeg and surrounding areas. I hear that, Corey.
Corey's laughing because he's in here. He's been sitting. He's about to do traffic, and now the phone's
I will
ringing.
get that for you.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the one phone call we've got so far this morning, and Abby is running to get it. So I'll have an update for you on whatever is going on there, hopefully soon. Otherwise, highways are looking okay. Sidewalks are nice and clear on my run-in this morning, though I will say you might want to wear some goggles because my eyes and forehead were hurting by the end of it. Other than that, though, if you see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, that call is down on a bike, right on cue.
Oh, there we go.
Who is biking in and said that everything is looking pretty good out there. So thanks for the call. And Heather Wells came in actually as well and has an addition to our list of buses that aren't running. So Rolling River School Division buses are canceled today because of the cold weather. Mountain View School Division buses are canceled as well due to poor rural road conditions and extensive snow and extreme cold. And in Brandon School Division, no buses in the rural areas. So schools all on, but no buses in those three. Brandon just in the rural areas. Of course, buses will run in the city. It is right now 6:41 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. And let's get to business news with Krista Lee Ramlakan. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So you're starting with tariffs, obviously. Donald Trump, the U.S. president, following through on the threat. So the order is 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, including, from Canada. What else do we know so far through the business lens here?
Well, the tariffs are scheduled to take effect March 12th, and this, of course, is on top of the economy-wide tariffs he has paused but is still threatening to reimpose across North America. So the CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association has said Canada should try to get an exemption, but Trump has said that the tariffs will be imposed without exceptions or exemptions. So Trump says the tariffs are meant to encourage production in the U.S., and Canadian steel and aluminum businesses are already feeling the consequences and the deja vu. So back in 2018, Trump targeted these same industries with a punishing import tax. Rahim Malou is the owner of Conquest Steel, a steel manufacturer and distributor based in Toronto, and he says some U.S. distributors have already canceled their orders, leaving the company with a significant amount of inventory.
It hits us even harder because we were in the midst of expanding into the U.S. market, and we had made the decision to keep our manufacturing facility in Canada in order to support the economy over here and hopefully create more jobs and ship to the U.S. instead of having a facility over there. And that's a decision that's coming back to bite us a little bit right now.
Meanwhile, some Canadian distributors have decided to stop shipping to the U.S. amid the ongoing uncertainty.
We'll take you to Selkirk in the next hour, as I've been mentioning. Of course, in Selkirk, they have people that are worried because there's a steel mill there. So stay tuned for that coming up. Next, though, in business news this morning, a group of investors led by Elon Musk has offered to buy a nonprofit that controls OpenAI for $97 billion. So what are the details here?
So this is really escalating the clash between the Tesla chief executive and the artificial intelligence company that he actually co-founded. So the bid is being backed by Musk's own AI startup, xAI. And Musk says he hopes to return OpenAI to being the open source, safety-focused force for good it once was. But OpenAI CEO Sam Altman posted on X, "No, thank you, but we will buy Twitter for $9.74 billion if you want." Now, of course, that is a bit of a dig because Musk acquired Twitter for much more than that, $44 billion, but its value later diminished according to outside estimates. Now, Altman says he thinks the offer is to slow down a competitor, and when asked how seriously he is taking the bid, he said not particularly. Now, Musk and Altman have been locked in a feud for years over the direction of the AI company. has taken since its founding. Musk has alleged that OpenAI has abandoned all pretense of proceeding as a charity, and the company is actively working to transition from its nonprofit roots to a for-profit company following billions of dollars in outside investment by Microsoft and others.
And finally, before we look at the markets this morning, let's turn to the fashion business, where I understand a totally villainized item is maybe going to make a comeback.
Yes, the skinny jean may be making a comeback. So over the last few months, a range of skinny styles have cropped up on fashion runways and influencer videos, indicating that the divisive garment could soon be a closet staple again. So part of the buzz came when TikTok star and Gen Z influencer Alex Earl debuted a pair and a partnership with denim brand Frame at the end of January. But the hype was already building before that. So some retail analysts say for the past 6 months, they've started to hear rumblings. And if you look at Google Trends data for skinny jeans, it actually spiked the week of January 12th. And it's been picking up steam ever since. Searches for skinny jeans have gone up 50% year over year. Brand American Eagle, known for its denim, has also seen interest grow. And on the runways, some top designers have done very slim silhouette pants. They're calling them skinny pants. But the difference here is that they're doing them in different kinds of patterns and very tailored fabrics, not just solid denim. Now, of course, this will probably be welcome news for retailers because whenever trends shift, it triggers demand. But remember, you don't have to keep up with the pace of trends in this age of social media. I mean, some people never even stopped wearing skinny jeans in the first place.
or gained weight, and then the straight jeans are skinny jeans.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I might be speaking about myself. What's going on in the markets, Crystal Lee?
In Europe, stocks are mixed. Germany is up, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is up, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is down. Oil is up 97 cents to $73.29 US per barrel. Gold is down $6.20 to $2,901.10 US per ounce. And the dollar is down just over a tenth of a cent to 69.7 cents US.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
I'll tell you what, we all need a laugh, right? That's Crystal Lee Ramlicam with Business News. Now, speaking of which, how are you doing right now? There's so much instability in the world, in politics, in the economy, and you're processing that instability in different ways because we're all different people. CBC's Michelle Both went out to hear how people are faring when it just feels like a lot.
I can say it definitely has an effect on a lot of people. It's definitely affecting, just overall how we can function day to day.
I think it's very dark times and you feel very troubled with everything going on. But I think it's important, especially with younger people like myself coming into the world and being able to vote, being able to re-engage with politics and look into your community of who to vote for and actually paying attention to what's going on in your community. I think is one of the most important things to do, especially with feeling maybe out of control of what's going on in the U.S. and how that's going to affect Canada, is to look to Canada and see who's actually running, why are they running, and look at their platforms.
I'm trying to keep out of it, trying not to listen to it because it gets too overwhelming. So I try not to think about it to lessen the stress on myself. So,
personally, a lot of unsure feelings right now. My husband and I have a mortgage, and all of these things, and uncertainty doesn't do well for things like bank rates and food costs and inflation are just crazy. So it just adds another level of insecurity. Sometimes there's a sense of I don't want to look, but making sure we do lots of stuff as a family. We sit down, we talk, we try to talk a little bit about things that are going on in the world. So the kids are young teenagers, so we don't want them to be shocked about things they hear. And we try to make sure to talk to them and just help them understand things that are happening.
Well, all that talking can certainly help, but so can a little music. This tune's actually from Manitoba's Don Amaro. He wrote Break the Glass in 2017 in response to the anxiety out there. To cry, to build a better future. seems still appropriate 8 years later. Have a listen.
No one ever seemed to listen to the ground beneath their feet, to the voices in the oceans, to the whispers in the trees. Now the water's rising, it's getting hard to breathe. Say it's not my problem, till it's breaking over me. Time's up, break the glass. I hear the wall of the dam just cracked. Put your heart in the burlap sack. You better be ready, ready when the flood comes back. Walls are not the answer when the bottom's caving in. This tide won't stop coming. It's gonna be sink or swim. Ooh, waist deep in the water, there ain't no higher ground. Ooh, Lord, if we're still worth it, have mercy on us now. Time's up, break the glass. I hear the wall of the dam just cracked. Put your heart in the burlap sack. You better be ready, ready when the flood comes. Time's up, break the glass. I hear the wall of the dam just cracked. It's a little too late to get your life on track. You better be ready, ready when the flood comes back.
Don Amaro, Break Glass, wrote that in 2017. Rallying cry for a brighter future, and thought we'd roll it this morning as we just had a story on about how people are processing some anxiety around the current political climate and the economy and world events. And speaking of which, let's talk about tariffs next. We have Ryan Tumulty here from the Toronto Star political reporter to talk about yesterday's announcement now. So 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel. In case you're wondering, roughly 90% of Canada's steel and aluminum exports to U.S. companies. So good morning to you, Ryan.
Good morning.
Seems like a silly first question to ask what the impact's going to be with that stat, but I mean, let me know how people are, how's the country positioning here?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be enormous. We're talking about two really well-established industries that have a lot of good, well-paying jobs, thousands of good, well-paying jobs. Aluminum is a huge industry in Quebec, for example. 10% of the exports that they export to anywhere, 10% of all of Quebec's exports are aluminum, almost all of it to the U.S. So this is going to be a big factor. And then, aluminum and steel are the building blocks of most of what we all buy every day. Cars, houses, buildings, washing machines, and even beer and soda cans all depend on aluminum and steel. So this is going to have a big impact.
Justin Trudeau, we heard a little bit of this. The Prime Minister is in Europe right now at that AI summit. But can you outline more for those that might have missed it, what his response is and also the federal government response? And maybe elaborate a bit, Ryan, like how quickly they're going to have to deal with maybe a bigger response to this? Because everything is moving. I mean, every day there's new news coming out of the States.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the Canadian response this morning was what we have all planned for it to be. So, the Prime Minister talked about retaliatory tariffs that they need to, but hoping to avoid that, really pushing that message that this is going to hurt American consumers. That AI summit that the Prime Minister was at, J.D. Vance, the Vice President in the U.S., was there. Of course, he was an Ohio senator before becoming Vice President. Prime Minister Trudeau apparently made the pitch to him that this is going to hurt jobs in the U.S., in Ohio specifically. I think you'll hear more of that messaging from the Canadian government over the next couple of weeks. Lots of pitches that this is going to be a problem, not just for Canadians, but for American consumers as well. And I think that is going to have to be what they do going forward. Donald Trump doesn't much care if these tariffs hurt Canada's economy. But if they hurt America's economy, if they hurt American consumers and American voters, he is likely to get turned around on these things. And I think that's the pitch you're going to hear.
And the million-dollar question is how much he cares in the short term, or whether or not he's going to position that part of his plan is that steel manufacturing comes back to the States, and down the line he envisions, having factories rebuilt all over the United States, and that will be the payoff to what is going to be in maybe the framing of short-term losses of jobs in the States. But how much of an economic hit can the States take, and how do we position that? Do we have a sense of how much? Like you talked about that exchange between Trudeau and Vance, talking about Ohio and saying, you need us. Is that message that you need Canada getting through? Because at least it seems with the rhetoric the president's continuing to talk about in terms of the 51st state and Canada becoming that, it doesn't seem to be landing.
Yeah, I think it is landing more broadly in U.S. politics. I think people are opening up to the idea that Canada can have a big impact on the U.S. I think an important part of this too is, Canada is in an existential fight here. If we don't keep and defend our economy, as Trump keeps talking about the 51st state, then our sovereignty is at risk. For American consumers, though, are they really prepared to threaten Canada? How long are they prepared to threaten Canada when it means higher gas prices, when it means higher grocery prices? At what point do they say, hey, maybe take the foot off the gas here because we're not trying to punish Canada? I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think we're all in line for more uncertainty, more frustration, and more unpredictability because Canada is taking the same approach Canada always takes, which is making a broader political case, making the case to senators, making the case to governors, mayors even, right across the U.S., that punishing Canada just punishes the U.S. But the only opinion that seems to matter right now is Donald Trump's, and he doesn't seem to be shaken on that.
Jagmeet Singh is saying there should be 100% tariff on Tesla. I know that Pierre Poilievre has also been speaking out about tariffs. Can you go through what the two of them are saying?
Yeah, both of them are suggesting that they respond with high tariffs. Pierre Poilievre has talked a little bit more about doing some of the things that Donald Trump wants, but doing them for Canada's needs, not just to appease Trump. So last week, he talked about border security, and he talked about the benefits that would bestow upon Canada, not just calming down Donald Trump, but that there would be real benefits for preventing guns and drugs and other things from crossing into Canada. Yesterday, he was talking about defense, specifically in the Arctic. He was talking about a new military base up there, 2 new naval icebreakers. Those are things that would benefit Canada, is his pitch, as much as they would also say to the U.S., we are taking our defense more seriously.
And Jagmeet Singh?
Jagmeet Singh, again, he's talking about tariffs. He targeted tariffs on Tesla as an example. I think he has more room to be as anti-Trump as possible because the overlap between Trump supporters and NDP supporters is essentially nil. I think you'll hear more aggressive rhetoric from him the whole way through.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate having you on as always.
All right, thank you.
Talking tariffs and talking Canada's responses. That's Ryan Tumulty, political reporter with the Toronto Star. It's time to go to Heather Wells for local headlines in Manitoba.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba plans to launch a public inquiry into Winnipeg's police headquarters project. The city spent $214 million buying an old Canada Post complex and converting it into a home for the Winnipeg Police Service. The project went $79 million over budget. A source in the Canoe government says a $2 million inquiry will be announced today. A new bus service rolls into northern Manitoba this spring. The region's been without bus service to Winnipeg since last year. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Minus 27 in Winnipeg. Extreme cold warning for the city of Winnipeg and most of southern Manitoba. Also includes Brandon, Steinbach, up through Riding Mountain. Wind chills around minus 40. Bundle up. Our high minus 19 with sun today. Rolling River, no buses. Mountain View School Division, no buses. Brandon School Division, no rural buses. This is all because of extreme cold. The commute otherwise, 788-3093 if you do need us. In the next hour of the show, Let's take you to Selkirk. About 500 people go to work at the steel mill there every day. We're going to talk to the city's mayor about all of the steel heading to the States now with a 25% tariff about to be slapped on it in March. In addition, in the next hour of Information Radio, to something fun, a Winnipeg woman who is embracing winter. She built this massive igloo. It's pretty awesome and elaborate. CBC's Jim Agapito had a bit of a tour, and this is part of a contest we're running called Show Me Your Winter. Stay tuned. 1 minute to 7 o'clock, and World Report's up next.
Today on The Current.
Artificial intelligence is going to have the kind of impact on our society that the development of electricity did.
World leaders, including Justin Trudeau, are meeting this week to discuss artificial intelligence, and one big question is about the role of AI in warfare and surveillance. The CBC's Nora Young is here to talk about what's at stake coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he will defend Canadian interests against U.S. tariffs. They are scheduled to take effect March 12th. This morning, reporters asked Trudeau if he would match those new tariffs dollar for dollar.
We hope that it will not come to that. We will work with the American administration and highlight imports of Canadian steel and aluminum create thousands, if not millions, of jobs and support families across the United States.
This week, the premiers are in Washington making the case for Canada. Kate McKenna has more on their message.
This is about changing minds for the long term.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is pushing a message to American lawmakers. Tariffs make things more expensive and will kill Canadian and American jobs.
It means higher inflationary costs for not just Canadian families, but American families as well.
But his message doesn't appear to be taking root.
It's time for our great industries to come back to America.
For Donald Trump, hurting Canadian business is the point. Yesterday, he announced a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. Tens of thousands of Canadian jobs are directly tied to those industries. Trump's angling to move those jobs south of the border.
If we make it in the United States, we don't need it to be made in Canada. We'll have the jobs. That's why Canada should be our 51st state.
Canada's premiers are meeting in Washington this week, all part of an anti-tariff push.
So we expect and hope that our government is explaining again our business case or our rationale for why we should be exempted.
Catherine Cobden is the president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. She says if these tariffs do go ahead, Canada must retaliate.
If this is going forward, Canada, it's time to act.
A senior Canadian government official says Canada is looking to build a response with its allies, since this applies to every country that exports steel and aluminum into the United States. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Washington.
The cracks in the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas are growing. Hamas has paused the release of more Israeli hostages set for Saturday. It says Israel has broken the deal. Israel has placed its soldiers on its highest alert, and Washington says the ceasefire should end if all the hostages are not released by noon Saturday. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has the latest from Jerusalem.
Protests continued into the night as Israelis pressed their government to keep the ceasefire going, to see all hostages freed from Gaza. Hamas has suspended the release of any more hostages beyond 16 set free over 3 weeks, accusing Israel of negotiating in bad faith and not allowing building materials into Gaza as promised. Hamas rejects U.S. President Donald Trump's promise of all hell breaking loose, saying threats have no value. Relatives like Sharon Lifshitz are trying to keep their hopes up.
But I think we have to brace ourselves and to wait and see what happened.
Israel denies it's dragging its feet or stopping aid. It's put forces on full alert and called a meeting of its security cabinet. But Israel's negotiating position does seem to have hardened since U.S. President Donald Trump proposed emptying Gaza of Palestinians. That's something Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cheered and Arab nations have flatly rejected. former Jordanian Foreign Minister Jawad al-Adnani.
It has been proven all throughout time that every time you don't produce a fair solution to the Palestinian issue, then another war is in the brewing.
Still, Trump meets with Jordan's King Abdullah in Washington today, determined to convince him to take Palestinians from Gaza. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is positioning the United States as the leader in artificial intelligence. Vance delivered a keynote address at the AI summit in Paris. During his speech, Vance slammed overregulation.
We believe that excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off, and we'll make every effort to encourage pro-growth AI policies. And I like to see that deregulatory flavor making its way into a lot of the conversations this conference.
Vance says AI must be free from ideological bias and it should never restrict the right to free speech. He says the most powerful AI systems will be built in the U.S., but invited other nations to partner with Washington. Canada's leaders are taking a closer look at how to defend our sovereignty and Arctic sovereignty in particular. As Juanita Taylor reports, the next federal government could face challenges on that front.
Our safety, territory, and trade with the U.S. requires we take back control of our north.
Pierre Poilievre unveiled part of his plan while touring Iqaluit, how he would accomplish security and stability in the north should he become the country's next prime minister. It includes doubling the size of Canada's rangers, adding more icebreakers, and building Canada's first permanent Arctic military base in Iqaluit.
Hostile powers want our resources, our shipping routes, and to be in striking distance of our continent.
Poilievre is taking aim at the Russian and Chinese governments. He says both have been eyeing the Arctic because of its viable shipping lanes due to climate change. A timely reference, says former Nunavut Senator Dennis Patterson, who says there is a need to work more closely with the United States.
It's in our mutual interest in defending and protecting our northern border as well as our southern border from threats increasingly coming from a Soviet North bristling with military bases, airstrips, and hypersonic missile capability, and China, which calls itself a near-Arctic state.
Nunavut's premier issued a statement about Poilievre's plan for the Arctic should he become prime minister. PJ Akero said whoever is next to lead in Ottawa, their plan for the north, amidst changing geopolitics, would have to be made in partnership with Northerners to reflect their rights, needs, and perspectives. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The U.S. president says Ukraine could eventually become part of Russia. Donald Trump made the comments in an interview with Fox News.
We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars, and, they may make a deal, they may not make a deal, they may be Russian someday, or they may not be Russian someday, but we're going to have all this money in there, and I say I want it back.
Trump says Ukraine has essentially agreed to a deal. Washington would continue to provide military aid in exchange for Kiev's rare minerals and resources. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet Friday at the Munich Security Conference. Zelensky has said Ukraine will not cede any land to Russia. Athletes from 25 countries are gathering in Vancouver and Whistler for the Invictus Games, but one Canadian veteran is not celebrating. Scott Snow is a 43-year-old retired Navy diver who was injured in the last Games, and he says he was left in chronic pain and unable to work. He spoke to the CBC's Peter Zimonjic.
Yeah, grab my crutches, please.
Scott Snow spent 14 years serving in the Royal Canadian Navy, retiring in 2015 on a medical certificate. Years later, he was invited to represent Canada at the 2023 Invictus Games in Dusseldorf, Germany. During a game of wheelchair rugby, Snow fell, injuring his neck, spine, and head.
Canada's Scott Snow takes a tumble out of his chair.
CBC News previously reported that when he returned to Canada, he was told that while serving military members on the team were insured, he wasn't medically covered. After 2 spine surgeries, Snow says he can no longer move easily around his home or afford to pay for physical therapy. The Liberal government responded by introducing insurance for veterans in future games, including the ones being held in BC this week. But Snow says he wasn't offered any help.
Still to this day, no one has reached out to me from the Canadian Armed Forces or D&D or Soldier On. So it's just real It's heartbreaking.
Veterans advocate Sean Bruyere says veterans should not have to take the government to court to get the benefits they are justly owed.
For him to be abandoned for the medical care while he's injured in an event that is supposed to put on a pedestal injured veterans is just really just beyond the pale.
Snow says he does not blame the Invictus Games and supports the organization. His suit is against National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces. It's being filed in federal court today. It asked for $2.4 million in compensation to pay for accessibility renovations to his house, physical therapy for his eye and spine, and the pain and suffering he has endured. Peter Zamanic, CBC News, Ottawa.
That is the latest from World Report. This month, we're asking you to follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach new listeners and helps you stay on top of the day's big stories. I'm Marcia Young. This is CBC News.
Frigid cold and even an extreme warning for us here in Winnipeg this morning and across the south. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live downtown in Winnipeg on 89.3. Also on YouTube this morning on CBC, and we've got an interesting hour ahead. We are going to be talking to the mayor of Selkirk. Hundreds of people go to work at the steel mill there every day. We're going to find out what he's thinking in the face of these tariffs that are coming in March on steel, 25%. In addition, this hour on the show, what about solutions? Well, Jim Rondo is going to be joining us. He spent 17 years in office as an NDP minister, and he was cabinet minister of science, technology, energy, and mines at one point. He weighed in actually with CBC asking about what to do next when these tariff threats started brewing. So we thought it'd be interesting to have an interview with him. Part of what he suggested is we need to expand our markets and have the euro become our common currency versus the US dollar. So stay tuned. That's part of what we'll explore. In addition to something fun I want to mention, we started a contest yesterday and we'll continue it today. We're asking you to show us your winter. We're going to meet a Winnipeg woman who's embracing the cold stuff. And just in time because it's going to be cold all week. So that's coming up as well. Right now, Heather Wells is in with other headlines. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney blames U.S. aggression toward Canada on social inequality in the U.S. Speaking to supporters in Winnipeg's King's Head pub last night, Carney also compared talk of Canada becoming a 51st state to Voldemort, a villain in Harry Potter novels, a villain so dangerous his name must not be repeated. So we'll hear more about what Carney had to say coming up. As well, a Winnipeg towing company is suing the city and its deputy mayor, alleging they reneged on a contract. Tartan Towing had won a contract to tow Winnipeg police vehicles last August. A few months later, after Deputy Mayor Janice Lukes raised questions, the city announced it would reopen that contract to new bids. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast now with Abby.
A very cold morning across the regions and an extreme cold warning in effect for all of southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, tracking it all the way down to the U.S. border, the Saskatchewan border. That's how far we're tracking these also. Expect very cold wind chills today. Temperatures reaching minus 40 and even colder in some of the regions, while temperatures may improve slightly during the day. These extreme wind chills will return overnight, with the wind chills dropping to around minus 41, 42. So take care, frostbite can develop quickly. For Winnipeg and surrounding area, we also have this cold warning in effect, minus 28 at this time. Clear conditions we're seeing. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast, but it will be bitterly cold. It will get breezy at times, and we'll see highs around minus 19, though the wind chill for Winnipeg feels like minus 40 this morning. So if you're making the transition from one bus to another, brace for it.
Sometimes it sounds like, on these mornings, it sounds like, don't you think, Curry, it sounds like Abby's announcing a tennis match. 40, 30, lots of 40s and 30s.
But very little love. Very little love.
Very little love.
We got love for you.
The commute today, what's going on?
Yeah, it's actually been very quiet overall. Haven't heard of any major issues. We did hear from Dan on a bike who says it's a fairly lovely commute, besides the fact that it's very cold. I do know the sidewalks and the bike lanes actually are fairly clear. So if you were able to bundle up and get out and keep keep moving, you can go pretty quickly if you want. I do suspect with this weather, there's going to be at least a few stalled cars out there this morning. So if you spot one or if you see anything else going on the roads, highways, anything like that, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
3 divisions have buses not running. They are Rolling River, Mountain View, and in Brandon School Division, the rural buses won't be running, all due to extreme cold. Well, how did you answer the last time someone asked you how you're doing? Odds are you said, fine, good, regardless of maybe how you actually felt. For young men in particular, it can be difficult for them to have discussions about how they're really doing. CBC's Gavin Axelrod recently spent some time at the University of Manitoba as part of our Communities in Focus initiative and took a look at different ways that people at the university are making space for vulnerable conversations around mental health, particularly with young men. And Gavin dropped by after the show yesterday to tell us all about it. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy. Thanks for having me.
So what made you want to look into this story?
Yeah, so before we did our Communities in Focus project at the University of Manitoba, we spoke to student leaders and people from different student groups about what matters to students. One of the most consistent things we heard is how much mental health matters to students. And we also heard that a men's mental health club had recently been formed at the school. And now I actually thought that was really interesting because you always hear about the stigma that men face when discussing their feelings. And we also know from Stats Canada data released in 2022 that the suicide rate was almost 3 times higher for men than it was for women. And so when I heard about this group at the university, I was impressed that a space for young men to talk about mental health run by students had actually existed. And when we arrived on campus, I got acquainted with Vaibhav Varma, founder of Men's Wellness Circle UM. And part of the reason for starting the club is because his younger brother Yash died by suicide in 2023, and he was only 16 years old.
My brother was the smartest person you've ever met. He was just someone that was good at everything. He would be tutoring his classmates in physics up till 1 in the morning, but he was equally as good with the arts. He competed in math competitions, but he also was an actor. He loved photography. He was a photographer. And, he could solve the Rubik's Cube in 15 or so seconds, but he taught himself to juggle.
Sounds like quite a person. How much did Yash's death impact Varma?
Well, it basically changed everything for him. It was personally devastating, but it also changed his career path. He actually planned on graduating with an undergrad degree in political science and becoming a lawyer, but now he's studying psychology and wants to one day be a clinical psychologist. He says if he didn't switch to psychology, he would regret it and wants to dedicate his life to helping others.
I realized that if my brother was struggling and no one knew about it, I was struggling in my own way after my brother's death. There are plenty of other students who are in the same boat, who are simply looking for someone to chat with.
What did Varma and other students you spoke to have to say about why young men might not talk about how they're doing?
Well, Varma says young men face a lot of pressure, but it's not always so easy to talk about it. And he says there's some bad advice out there, which makes people think it's stronger to just suppress your emotions. But sometimes there can also be cultural barriers where mental health just isn't discussed very openly in general. And Barış Tavis, an international student from Turkey who I met during a town hall event at the university, he's got big dreams of going to med school and hopes his mother, who is a doctor, can participate in his white coat ceremony one day. And while he has a strong support network to help him navigate the challenges of school, he knows it's not always so easy for everyone his age to speak up if they need help.
There's a stigma about the mental health and men showing emotions. They see it as a sign of weakness. I believe it's social media's fault too. The recent surge of, the man has to be tough, take care of the family. You cannot take care of a family if you cannot take care of yourself. That includes mental being as well, right?
Now, we talked about Varma's mental health, Varma's men's wellness circle, but I understand that's not the only way that students and community members are actually having conversations about mental health at U of M. What else did you find out?
Yeah, so we actually got to sit in on a barbershop talk event near the end of January. It was actually in a barbershop on campus there. It was packed, basically standing room only. The facilitators were all at the front sitting in gold barber chairs, guiding the discussions by asking questions to the audience. It was a pretty welcoming environment as well. They had pizza and people could also get free haircuts because, of course, the event was in a barbershop. And here's a bit of what that sounded like.
Like, I gotta get to the mechanic, and no one's coming in for my car. You know what I mean? Although, you know, whoever the mechanic, I'll get it fixed and whatever. But we have to actually understand those social class realities, which divides our black communities. You know what I mean? And this idea of black excellence, I don't know if we can talk about that. Yeah, I want to talk about that. But, you know, you bring up a good point.
Okay, I'm hearing the shaver and I'm hearing a blow dryer there, I think, and then maybe a conversation about the black community. But can you tell us more about what you heard when you were there?
Yeah, so it was a very wide-ranging conversation. You know, sometimes there were even some laughs, but right in front of us, people were developing trust and relationships, and you could see some of that trust on display when people shared their perspective on different things. It's not always easy to do that, especially in front of people that you may not know. But the theme of the event was about mental health and anti-Black racism. And the event was also in honor of Afolabi Opaso. He was a 19-year-old international student who went to the University of Manitoba. Opaso was fatally shot by Winnipeg police in 2023. His family and their lawyer have since said he was experiencing a mental health crisis when he was killed. And his death is something students and community members are still grappling with. Now, Warren Clark is an assistant professor at the university and organized a barbershop event along with some of his student coordinators. And here is some of what he said he hopes participants in the event bring to and take away from the conversation.
Be brave to have these conversations. Be outspoken in spaces that allow you to have conversations. And understanding that being vulnerable is not necessarily a bad thing as long as you're safe in being vulnerable to share how you feel. And the last thing I'll say is if there's, when there's opportunity to seek professional help, that's not a bad thing.
Clark says something he's noticed since these talks started in 2018 is that sometimes the sessions go on for a couple of hours, so a good while, but people are hungry for more conversation, and sometimes they'll stick around afterwards outside the shop and continue talking. And that's an indicator of just how important the space can be for people who attend. Now, Clark also says sometimes all people need is to know that they're being humanized in a social space that accepts them.
For Black men and boys specifically, there's many spaces that, we can't be vulnerable. We have this idea, this stereotypical idea, which is negative, that you ought to be strong, you ought to not cry, and that's generally masculinity.
Now, going back to the Men's Wellness Circle, we actually went to their first event at the end of last month called Wings and Wellness. Now, about a dozen people showed up for that, and it was a pretty low-key event with people sitting around a table talking about self-care, and some of the members were Yash Varma's friends. That's the 16-year-old who died by suicide, and his brother Vaibhav Varma says if Yash were here, he'd be the club's biggest supporter.
He would be talking to everyone, and he was just such a people person that could connect with literally anybody. And I really miss him during times like these because I know how much he would be a big help.
Thanks for bringing this in today, Gavin. Really valuable and insightful to hear what's happening at U of M around this.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I could share this with you.
Gavin actually joined us in studio yesterday with that story. He's a reporter at CBC Manitoba. You can read more about the story at cbc.ca/Manitoba. And he came upon it, of course, during our Communities in Focus initiative. So stay tuned to hear where we're going to be out next. That was when we were intensely at U of M for 2 weeks earlier in the month. It is 7:22 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. My name is Marcy Marcusa. You are with CBC, and behind the glass, our YouTube producer, Kevin Ipatebo, director, Corey Funk, and Abby Adiemi, who's our technical producer on the program. Cold, minus 27 right now in Winnipeg, minus 31 in Brandon and Thompson, and an extreme cold morning across most of southern Manitoba. Well, we have a bit of music up next, and it's from a Canadian group, speaking of which we're still watching for when the Juno nods come out. They're happening later this morning. But this group actually broke up and then got back together. They're out of PEI. They split up back in 2013, but reunited 5 years later to play some scattered gigs. But now they've got their first release in over 10 years. It's a group called 2 Hours Traffic, and keep it coming.
Keep on coming round. It's been a while since I felt this down. I'm not breaking for no one right now. All the big debts are coming due. It's been a while since I felt brand new. Phone is ringing and I'm out of time. Keep it coming. I'm not running away. Not running locked and the blinds are down. I listen out for the slightest sound. I'm not breaking for no one right now. Keep it coming. I'm not running away. Not running away. Keep it coming. I'm not running away. Not running away. No matter what they throw, we'll face it like it ain't tough. No matter what comes up. No matter what they throw, we'll face it like it ain't tough. No matter what comes up. Keep it coming.
It's the name of that tune. Keep it coming. 2 hours traffic from Charlottetown with new music on CBC. Well, next on the show, let's talk sports. Khalil Hassan Ali is in for Scott Regehr again this morning. Morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
So let's start hockey. We got to see teams practice for the first time yesterday ahead of this Four Nations tournament, right?
Yeah, so it looks like Jets defenseman Josh Morrissey will be paired up with Colton Parayko as the Team Canada second pairing on the blue line. Also looks like Morrissey gets power play time as well with the red and white second unit alongside Shea Theodore. Mark Scheifele didn't end up getting the call to step in. Sidney Crosby looks healthy enough to play. He took line rushes with Nathan McKinnon from Colorado and also Winnipeg's Mark Stone. Crosby, who is 37, has been dealing with an injury the past few days. In the end, though, he says nowhere else he'd rather be.
Every opportunity you can, whether it's, playing for Pittsburgh or, playing for Canada, you don't want to miss games. And this is an awesome opportunity, something I haven't done in a long time. So wanted to be part of this group and obviously also want to make sure that I can play at the level that you need to compete here. So everybody seemed comfortable with that and I feel good about it.
There's a couple other Jets who are in Montreal for their respective team. Kyle Connor featured prominently for the Americans on their top line. Connor Hellebuck most likely getting the start in between the pipes for them as well.
Let's go to skiing. After a day off, competition is going to resume at the Alpine World Ski Championships. They're being held in Austria.
Yeah, so it's the debut of a new team combined discipline for the women today. This event features two racers, one competing in a downhill, one in a slalom. Canada's Laurence Saint-Germain, the defending world champion in the slalom. She'll be racing alongside Cassidy Gray. Saint-Germain is returning to skiing after an ankle injury sidelined her last year. Now, in a video up on our website, Saint-Germain says that returning to competition not only about the physical, but also the mental as well.
Feeling healthy and having a free spirit and empty mind to be able to just attack and hammer is such a game changer. And injuries, for sure, it's hard to do that because you don't know if you crash, if it's going to hurt while you ski and everything. So for sure on race day, you have to put that denial mode that everything is fine and just try to go fast.
Now, this builds upon what we talked about yesterday, that American Michaela Schifrin pulled out of the giant slalom, citing struggles with PTSD from a crash late last year in that race as well. So a lot of athletes outlining concerns not only about their physical, but also their mental struggles too.
And finally, the new superstar for the LA Lakers is already endearing himself to his new city.
So many people really still shocked at Luka Doncic going from Dallas over towards Tinseltown. He suited up for game action yesterday for the Lakers. Did pretty well on the court, but it's really off the court that he's really helping out. LA, as you might remember, was ravaged by deadly wildfires last month. In an effort to help Doncic, he's released a letter saying that he's going to be donating $500,000 to assist with relief efforts, and he's going to be there in the long term, not just the short term. My favorite part of the entire letter is that he signed it, "Your New Neighbor." The Slovenian explains why he did all of this.
I was trying to give back to the community. I did that in Dallas, did it in Slovenia mostly. But it's important for me. When I learned, that horrible things happened, studied a little bit more about what happened. It was really important for me to give back to the community.
Now, I do want to outline, so he's from Slovenia. He's lived in Dallas and LA as well, but he's helped out in other places as well. In May of 2023, 8 children and a security guard were killed in Serbia in a school shooting. He paid for each of their funerals. He paid for counseling for their families and affected students as well as staff. And just a reminder, Marcy, that he is just 25 years old, so a very mature young man.
All right. Thanks a lot, Khalil. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marcy.
That's Morning Sports with Khalil Hassanali filling in for Scott. Still ahead on the program today, we're going to be talking about how cold it is because we've got the extreme warnings, but we are wondering how you stay warm, how you stay positive. We're asking you in a contest, show us your winter. And in the second installment today, we're going to visit an urban igloo is how it's described. So stay tuned. We're going to hear more about that. Also, just want to mention, due to the cold, there's no buses running in Rolling River School Division, Mountain View School Division, and in the rural area of the Brandon School Division. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 28. And yeah, that snow does have an extra crunch this morning. It's bitterly cold. We're warming up to minus 19. It'll be sunny. And that extreme cold warning for Winnipeg and all of southern Manitoba, with wind chill values approaching minus 40 throughout the morning. Manitoba plans to launch a public inquiry into Winnipeg's police headquarters project. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, it comes 8 years after a request from City Council.
Winnipeg spent $214 million buying an old Canada Post complex and converting it into a home for the Winnipeg Police Service. That project went $79 million over budget. It inspired 2 audits, an RCMP investigation, and civil lawsuits against a former chief administrator and dozens of construction firms. In 2017, City Council asked the project to launch a public inquiry into this project, as well as a series of other real estate and construction projects. At the time, the PC government refused, but the NDP made the inquiry an election promise. And that inquiry will be announced today, albeit at a scope limited to the police HQ. A source in the Canoe government says Labour lawyer Garth Smorang will serve as commissioner for the inquiry. It has a $2 million budget. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is responding this morning to U.S. President Donald Trump's new 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified.
Trudeau in Paris attending a summit on artificial intelligence. He says Canada and the U.S. should not be fighting one another. Those tariffs are expected to kick in on March 12th. Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney says the suddenly aggressive attitude towards Canada from the United States is rooted in that country's inequality. Carney spoke to a crowd of supporters at Winnipeg's King's Head pub last night.
I think that Americans built a social safety net with enormous holes in it that tens of millions of people fell through. The Americans worshipped at the altar of the market, and the gains were not spread across that society. And now there's a backlash. Now there's a backlash, and that backlash is leading to them pushing out against us.
U.S. President Trump has repeatedly mused about making Canada the 51st U.S. state. A Winnipeg towing company is suing the city and its deputy mayor, alleging they reneged on a contract. Tartan Towing had won a contract to tow Winnipeg police vehicles last August. A few months later, after Deputy Mayor Janice Lukes raised questions, the city announced it would reopen the contract to new bids. Tartan claims the city unilaterally refused to negotiate with the company. It claims Lukes encouraged the breach with defamatory comments made in media. The company launched 2 other lawsuits naming Lukes last year. Lukes says she would not comment on this 3rd lawsuit, but says it's her job to ensure taxpayers are getting value for their tax dollars. The city of Winnipeg declined to comment while the matter is ongoing. None of the claims have been tested in court. First Nations children and families harmed by Canada's on-reserve child welfare system can soon apply for compensation as part of a class action settlement. It's for children and families who experienced racial discrimination through Ottawa's chronic underfunding of the First Nations Child and Family Services Program. People who were removed from their families and reserves between 1991 and 2022 and placed in child and family services can begin applying as early as next month. Advocates for First Nations families say the compensation is an important step forward. Mary Burton is at Zungunzi O'Day, a group that works with Indigenous youth and families in Winnipeg.
Of course, this isn't going to take care of all the hurt and trauma that was suffered, but it's going to help families who are struggling and help them get the help that they need in order to live a better life.
The $23 billion class action is the largest ever in Canada. A Manitoba judge will hear arguments today in a proposed class action lawsuit against a non-profit. The lawsuit alleges children in the care of Marymount, Inc., an agency that takes care of at-risk youth, were physically and sexually abused at their facilities for decades. It names Marymount, its parent corporation, the Rosso Compassion Network, and the government of Manitoba. Motions filed by two unnamed former residents say when they reported sexual assaults, they were ignored by staff. It also revealed a girl living at Marymount took her own life, and critical gaps were found in her care. The three defendants filed motions last week opposing class action certification. The Paw and 5 other northern Manitoba communities will be getting new bus service this spring. NCN Thompson Bus Lines has announced a new route connecting those communities to Winnipeg. Dan Cannell is the president of the Chamber of Commerce in the Paw and OCN and says northern communities need this.
Our medical services are limited. We see them being reduced all the time. A lot of people more and more often are relying on medical services from Winnipeg, and now this provides another safe alternative for our community to be able to get down to Winnipeg for their appointments and back up to the north in safe manners.
The region's last bus service shut down in 2024, leaving locals scrambling to find transport to Winnipeg. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Time for the regional forecast now with Abby.
Dangerously cold across the province from the southern regions all the way down to the northern part of the province. It is cold. An extreme cold warning in effect for all of southern Manitoba. Across board, we're seeing temperatures hovering around -30s at this point. And from south all the way down up, the wind chill actually feels like -40, -41, -42.
All right, Abby. Because of that, we have 3 divisions with no buses running today. Rolling River School Division, the Brandon Rural Area. The buses in the Brandon School Division and the rural area only, and then also Mountain View School Division is the 3rd. Corey.
Overall, the bright side is that overall it's been actually a pretty quiet commute. Haven't heard of any major issues out there at all. But if you're out there, you see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC computer line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, up next on CBC on Monday's show, we took you to a winter fun zone built by friends in Wolseley. Today, we're taking you somewhere new. This is part of a CBC Manitoba contest called Show Me Your Winter. We are asking you to show us what you're doing to make the season fun and the frigid temperatures bearable. And you could win a great prize. Now today, CBC's Jim Agapito takes us to East Kildonan. He checked out an urban igloo there whose bright colors are turning heads.
Now Marnie, it's pretty cold today, and I'm looking, and you built, I guess would be a winter refuge out here. Tell me about what you built in your front yard.
I decided to build a community ice igloo for the kids and people to walk by. I'm big on building community and safe neighborhoods and getting out in the wintertime, being active. So I decided to do an ice igloo. 2 years ago, I built a rainbow ice wall around the yard, and it was a huge hit with the neighbors and the kids, and they always stop and talk to me about it. And so something that I thought I would do.
But you built an igloo. Tell me about the process. Like how did you build this?
So you start off with plastic or tinfoil containers. You fill them up with water, a little bit of food coloring, a dash of salt. You stir it all up and you leave it overnight. The next morning you go and you put them out and you start piling them up. You create mortar with snow and water, and you start stacking them and secure it with water.
So Marnie, describe for me the igloo.
The igloo is approximately 6 foot wide for circumference and about 4 foot wide. I decided not to go too tall because I wanted it to fit underneath the tree nicely, but I wanted enough headspace for people to be able to enjoy, because I do want this as like a winter gathering place. Come on, let's have a tour. So we put in the little hooks to like hook all the lights up. They have fallen out once, but that's okay. You'll notice like we just like had to put the mortar in. These layers were a lot easier. These ones were a little bit unique of shape, as you can tell up here, where we had to be creative on and use tons and tons of mortar.
How do you make sure it just stays?
Well, these ones were quite difficult. So we would have to we would put the mortar on and we would have to hold it for a few minutes. So once you had the first two started, then the other ones kind of went in.
Well, this is such a feat, that you should be very proud of, and this is definitely showing us your winter.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And I would like to thank all of the neighborhood. All of my neighbors and community have been a huge support, and stopping and giving me a high five or a thumbs up, or stopping in to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, can I take pictures? Can I go check it out with my kids? Absolutely, because this is what winter's about. This is what community is about, bringing people together.
I love that. And the video is really one you got to watch, with all the colors and the shots of the blue sky, with the opening up through the ice blocks. Gorgeous. CBC's Jim Agapito out visiting East Kildonan resident Marnie McCluskey and her igloo. We want to see your winter, no matter how big or small. Part of our contest. Show us your winter. It could be your favorite cross-country ski route. Maybe it's your killer hot chocolate recipe. Maybe you're in your kitchen. How do you embrace winter? What do you do? To enter, send a picture or a short video to win@cbc.ca with a little description. Win@cbc.ca. Everyone who shares a story is entered to win a fabulous CBC's Winter Prize Pack, and we will draw a name at the end of the week. So lots of time still to share what makes winter special for you.
Here's to the bowl. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
7:42 a.m. is the time right now. I'm Marcy Marcusa, minus 27 on your Tuesday morning here on a really cold one in Winnipeg and across southern Manitoba. Well, it's time to look at the U.S. Threat of tariffs through a Manitoba lens. We have two interviews coming up on this. First, let's set the table. Donald Trump, the U.S. president, made it official yesterday, 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports in Canada. And that is obviously a huge deal across the country. Roughly 90% of Canada's steel and aluminum exports go to American companies. That's according to data from Statistics Canada. We know also in 2018 there were tariffs that affected this country that were also slapped on during Trump's first presidency. So we want to take you to Selkirk next, and that is because hundreds of people go to work at the steel mill in Selkirk each and every day. So the city's mayor is with us now to talk more about the impact that these tariffs are going to have once they kick in on March the 12th. Good morning, Larry Johansson.
Hey, good morning, Marcy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. What's the chatter in Selkirk all about this at the coffee shops? And what are people talking about?
Well, it's not good. We've seen this in 2018, and it seems like we're reliving Groundhog Day by going through this again. We are not only Selkirk Steel Mill, but we're Manitoba Steel Mill. We represent the province here with steel and with steel exports. And this has been a very successful mill. It's well over 100 years old. It's had some retooling done to it, so it's green steel that comes out of that mill, which means it's environmentally friendly. It's made from recycled steel, so it's very, very important that it's not disrupted. We've got well over 500 employees that work in the steel industry in Selkirk. And ironically, for a community our size, the good news is that more people come to Selkirk to work than people leave Selkirk to work. So I think it shows between the steel mill and the provincial government how important this is to Selkirk.
Now, the Gerdau steel mill is what we're talking about, and then there's also two other manufacturers that are impacted here. When you talk about that number, I understand of 500 people. When you say, can you elaborate a bit on what is made? Because I think some Manitobans may not realize, about the steel mill in Selkirk. What is actually made?
Yes, absolutely. So way back in the day, a few decades ago, it was mostly rebar that was made at the steel mill. And like I say, the Brazilian company that bought our steel mill owned a lot of other steel mills in this country and in the States and other countries. This steel mill had the opportunity to retool. They seen that their investment here was a good one. So now the steel that comes out of here, and we're looking at a lot of semi-trailers loaded with steel every day that comes out of here on its way to the U.S. as one destination. There's elevator steel that's made here. There's still rebar steel that's made here. The steel goes into a lot of construction, a lot of rebuilding. And just a fun fact, Marcy, to give you an idea of how far-fetching this steel goes, the highest building that was built in Dubai has Selkirk steel in it. So it just gives you an idea how far-reaching this is and how important it is to keep this important industry going.
Can it survive a 25% tariff? I mean, what happens?
Well, that's a question that's kind of the unknown right now. I know the 2018 tariffs, they lasted less than a year, which was good. They had no layoffs at the mill, which was also very, very good. I don't know. That was Trump also, and now here he is again. He's got quite a group with him this time around, so that really worries me. But I think one of the underlying things here, Marcy, is what is this doing to employees on both sides of the border? I mean, I've been watching this closely, and I don't think the American steel employees in the industry is any more happy with this than we are. And I wish these guys, when they're signing these executive orders and when they're having these discussions, I wish they would stop and think about the people they're impacting. There's retirees that could be 5-6 years away from retiring. They're worried about their pensions. There's people 40, 50 years old. If they lose their job, they're worried, can I get another job? Another job of the same caliber that I have. And then there's the young families that are working at these mills. And, they have young kids to raise and to put through school. And, I wish they would stop and think about the lives that they're impacting.
Just so I'm clear here, Mayor Johansson, what percentage of what's coming out of Selkirk Steel is going to the U.S.? Like, if you lose that market, how big of a deal is this? Obviously, it's massive, but what's the percentage?
Well, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I did see a few numbers before, but I'm sure it's over 70% of the steel that goes into the U.S. But we also have to remember the steel, even if it's going to other countries or overseas, more than likely it's going through the U.S. also to be able to get to ships and that are going. So it's a big number. Canada,
it's part of the supply chain. Yeah, right.
Part of the supply chain. Yeah. Exactly. So Canada, this is a wake-up call for Canada, I feel, and this is just personal. This is just from me, Marcy, but I feel it's a bit of a wake-up call that it's not business as usual. Even if these tariffs come off, within a year or maybe within a few months, fingers crossed, we still have to look at doing business differently. We have to do more business interprovincial. We have to start thinking us first, Canada first. It's very, very important. I know people are talking now, buying local and being more patriotic, and I'm 110% behind that. And this is the time. You're wearing wake-up call.
You're wearing a hat around town. I heard that. What does it say on it?
Canada is already great. I got that hat a couple of years ago. In fact, it might have been back when the 18 tariffs were imposed, but I was on our beautiful waterfront in Selkirk, at a Canada Day celebration, and a fella came up to me with a little bag, and he says, Mr. Mayor, you don't know me, but he says, I like what you guys are doing in Selkirk, and I have bought you something. And it was this hat. And I didn't just throw it in the closet, Marcy. I wear it, the odd time. But right now, I'm in Fredericton on a conference, Sustainable Communities, which is ironic considering what we're going through. I have that hat here, and I wore it at the airport. I wore it on the plane, and I can't count how many people have said that hat is fantastic. That hat has been a lot of meaning to this.
Just as a last question, we have another interview coming up looking at sort of this angle. It'll lead us right into this in terms of what the province could do. But my question to you, I guess, as the mayor of Selkirk is, what would you like to see if these tariffs go, extend for some time here? Like, what would you like to see or need to see from the provincial and federal governments to support the steel industry?
Well, that's another good question. I mean, I have faith in our provincial government very much. I work closely with them. Premier Canoe and I consider ourselves, being able to talk freely. The ministers, we're able to talk freely with them. I respect them all. I guess I have to kind of leave it in the Premier's hands right now.
Fair enough.
I'm anxious to see what happens in Washington today. I know they're in Washington, and they're going to be talking about, to other industry leaders.
But what might be next?
As mayor of Selkirk and as mayor of the community that's got the Manitoba steel mill, I'll call it. I've got a stake in the game. We've got a stake in the game here, so we all have to work together on this. And it's one of the most important things right now.
Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for thinking of me, Marcy. Have a good day.
You too. That's the mayor of Selkirk, Larry Johansson. So, of course, as he's mentioning there, hundreds of people do come to work at the steel mill there every day. 3 businesses there employing some 500 people when it comes to steel. So now let's look at things from the provincial point of view. It's 9 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM on CBC. And U.S. President Donald Trump is putting this 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. He signed the order yesterday. He said they would be imposed, quote, without exceptions or exemptions. And March 12th is the date that we're looking at here. So what can be done now? Let's talk to Jim Rondo about it. He's a former NDP MLA and cabinet minister in this province. He spent 17 years in office. He was Minister of Science, Technology, Energy and Mines, among other files. But when the tariff threat started amping up, he wrote to CBC saying, quote, we need to expand our markets, similar to what Larry Johansson just said. But he also said we need to have the euro become the common currency of exchange versus the US dollar and identify 5 or 6 critical minerals that we ship to the States and stop this. And he's with us now via Zoom. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So let me walk through sort of some of the things that you said that you feel that we need to do to reposition. If we expand markets, not just across the country, but in Manitoba, where do we look to, in your view?
Well, I think what we have to do is look at where people need our critical minerals. And if you look at Europe, they've got a great auto industry. A lot of critical minerals and science and technology are developed and produced in Europe and Asia. I think what we have to do is look at all the people who are using it, our materials, end users, and then connect with them. And I think one of the interesting things is that this is not just an attack on Canada. It's an attack on our entire free trade system, on our fair trade system that was established 60 years ago. And we can't allow it to happen. And we being the entire world.
You talked about, when we're talking about minerals, you say we need to identify 5 or 6 critical minerals, just to repeat here, that we ship to the USA and stop this. We can pay the companies you wrote for the minerals and just keep them in storage. Can you sort of explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, there's some in minerals like tantalum. Tantalum is produced in Manitoba. It's a critical mineral, very rare mineral, and it's used in manufacturing of electronic devices. And it's needed. It's a critical mineral. Well, we have 5 or 6 of these. I found out when I was Minister of Mines, and most of them go straight to the United States. And then from there, they get produced into final products. I think what we do is we don't try to fight a bully by fighting up a bully on their own terms. I think what we have to do is look at our strengths. Our strengths are these critical minerals that can't be replicated. And so what we do is we say, we're going to stop these things, the 5 or 6 major critical minerals that Canada only produces, and stop them. There's other minerals like magnesium and other things that we have in an abundant supply that we could produce and ship to Europe. There's other materials that we, again, are a major supplier to the world. Well, what we have to do is say, how do we build our companies so that we're not landlocked and we go to Europe? Maybe we then develop Churchill better and start saying, okay, we are a trading nation. We shouldn't have 72% of all our products going straight to the US. We need to move forward. And I have huge faith in the government of Manitoba in moving Manitoba's interests forward in this. But we need help, and we need help from Canada, all the premiers, and most are on board, and we need help with other countries. We just cannot allow a bully to change the economics and abuse their allies, as is being done.
You talked also about establishing an export tariff on electricity, gas, and oil. I mean, you're talking about throwing all the measures really at the states right now. Is some of what your point of view is informed by, it sounds like, is repositioning ourselves with new markets is almost more critical than thinking about how to work through this tariff threat and stay in partnership with the United States?
I think one of the things this has told us is it's not the first time. It happened about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It could happen again. I think what we have to do is figure out how all of our markets happen. And we can help people. We can help people in other countries by being more green. We could export more natural gas, which is much cleaner. It's basically the energy source for most of Japan that they use. And we have abundant of it, but it's landlocked. So what we have to do is look at our other markets. And we have to look at how we get all of these wonderful benefits that Canada has out to other markets. And so I think it's great now because everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about how we deal with this crisis. But I think when you have 72% of everything you produce go to one supplier, you're vulnerable. We have to diversify our markets.
Just as a last question, I understand you're surprised, was the language you used, that U.S. citizens aren't as concerned as Canadians about tariffs and rising costs for goods. What sense are you making of that?
Well, we just had a friend of ours come by in California, and there we were talking about the fires and the rebuild. And it was interesting because BC is the major supplier of lumber.
Yeah, they can't rebuild without Canada.
They can't rebuild without Canada.
Softwood builds the houses. Yep.
Absolutely. You're going to rebuild the houses, you need Canadian lumber. Well, if you add 25%, that affects not only California, but it affects all people because their insurance costs then go up. When the insurance costs go up to fix the houses and fires by 25%, that's going to affect every single person by increasing the insurance rates. It's going to affect the construction rates everywhere. And that's going to hurt the American people. It's going to hurt the Canadian people by losing jobs. I have never been in a situation where a person with huge amount of power looks to create a lose-lose situation instead of a win-win. I think we have to reach across the border and around the world to find win-win situations and get out of this. And that's why I said the euro. Maybe what we have to do is look to Europe and other Asian countries to find our allies.
Yep. We will
in the world order.
We'll have to leave our conversation there in this uncharted territory and unprecedented time. But thank you for your time. Appreciate having you with us via Zoom.
Thank you and welcome again.
That is Jim Rondo, former MLA and cabinet minister. Heather Wells with headlines now.
Yes, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney in Winnipeg last night, speaking to supporters at the King's Head pub, blames U.S. aggression towards Canada on social inequality in the U.S. And a new bus service rolls into northern Manitoba this spring. That region's been without bus service to Winnipeg since last year. Your next local news at 8:30.
After 8 o'clock, the usually packed ER at Health Sciences Centre cleared out swiftly during a code orange was called during a blizzard last month. A frontline nurse says it was, quote, magical. But where did all the patients go? What can be learned from the coordination that day? Stay tuned. The Chief Operating Officer of HSC joins us after 8 o'clock on the show. Minus 27 extreme wind chills in Winnipeg and across the south today.
With Tom Power. The Canadian stand-up comedian Darcy Michaels spent 20 years searching for an audience until he and his husband Jer Bear went viral on TikTok. Now they have 2 new streaming specials where they open up about their love story and how going viral changes your relationship.
See, I got you something too. A Costco membership.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
World leaders, including Justin Trudeau, are meeting this week to discuss artificial intelligence, and one big question is about the role of AI in warfare and surveillance. The CBC's Nora Young is here to talk about what's at stake coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he is coordinating with world leaders to respond to new U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs. Trudeau is in Paris for an AI summit. And as Olivia Stefanovich reports, he had an opportunity this morning to send a message directly to the Trump administration.
As usual, these summits are a great opportunity to speak with a range of leaders.
Moments after the Prime Minister made those comments to reporters in Paris, a senior federal government official says Justin Trudeau got in a word with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance.
We will stand up for Canadian workers. We will stand up for Canadian industries.
The official says Trudeau mentioned the impact steel tariffs will have in Ohio, Vance's home state, among Canada's largest markets, and one of the states where U.S. President Donald Trump wants to revive steelmaking. Trudeau did not announce retaliatory measures today, but he warned Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports will drive up costs for Americans. Trudeau says Canada will work with the Trump administration over the coming weeks to highlight the consequences the tariffs could have on both sides of the border. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Paris.
For more on the response from Canada's politicians, let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, these steel and aluminum tariffs do not come into effect until March. What happens between now and then?
Marcia, this reinstatement of tariffs under the pretense of a national security threat was premised on there having been a surge of unfair imports that resulted in mill closures and underutilized U.S. facilities. However, in the president's own order, there's a statistic that suggests that this increase, for example, of aluminum from Canada, has happened at a rate actually less than the increase in U.S. consumption over the last 8 to 10 years. This may be a good argument for Canada to make to get this pulled off in the next couple of weeks. The relatively low exchange rate right now could also offset some of the extra cost of Canadian exports into the U.S. As Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet pointed out on social media last night, there may not be a major effect, for example, on mills in his province. The U.S. could just be bringing inflation on itself here. If that argument doesn't carry the day, retaliation could be coming. François-Philippe Champagne last night said Canada's response this time will be clear, calibrated, but also coordinated with other countries that are getting hit. That may take a bit of time. The $30 billion list released last week of potential U.S. products to hit with counter tariffs, that falls just short of what would be a dollar-for-dollar retaliation for these new metal tariffs. So we'll watch to see if additional moves are now deemed appropriate.
And a key part of all of this effort to stop the tariffs, as the Premier is going to Washington today, what can you tell us about that?
Well, they too will be carrying the message that the White House here is inflicting self-harm. David Eby last night pointing out that the aluminum smelter in his province exports a unique commodity that Americans don't make themselves.
They're taxing themselves.
They're going to have to buy it from us, or they'll have to buy it from someone else, and it will all be subject to the tariff.
We'll watch to see if any premiers double back to their threats from last week now, pull U.S. booze off the shelves again, cancel contracts to pile on to the federal response.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. While Donald Trump was signing executive orders yesterday, he also took aim at paper straws.
These things don't work. I've had them many times, and on occasion they break, they explode. If something's hot, they don't last very long, like a matter of minutes. And I don't think that plastic's going to affect a shark very much as they're munching their way through the ocean.
The U.S. president signed an executive order rolling back a Biden administration policy. It was designed to phase out federal purchases of single-use plastics, including straws, by 2035. Less than 10% of plastic waste is currently recycled. The rest takes hundreds of years to break down. And researchers have found microplastics in every corner of the planet, including inside the bodies of animals and humans. Donald Trump and his raft of executive orders are pushing the legal limits of a U.S. president's powers. Some legal scholars have gone as far as to call it a constitutional crisis. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh is in Washington. And Cameron, what can you tell us?
Well, it's just day 23. President Trump has signed nearly 60 executive orders, which allow him to guide the government but not create his own laws. Now, his edicts have included tariffs, crackdowns on illegal immigration, halting foreign aid, and a broad freeze on federal spending. Courts have already blocked several of them, including dismantling of USAID and withholding government funds, yet Trump is pushing ahead. Senator Chris Murphy is a Democrat from Connecticut.
This is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced, certainly since Watergate. The president is attempting to seize control of power and for corrupt purposes. The president wants to be able to decide how and where money is spent so that he can reward his political friends, he can punish his political enemies. That is the evisceration of democracy.
Lawsuits are pouring in while Vice President J.D. Vance took to X, suggesting judges do not have authority over the Trump administration's executive power.
So who can limit executive orders?
Well, historically, courts and Congress. The question is, how much can Trump change unilaterally, including Elon Musk's revamping of government? Charlie Dent is a former Republican congressman.
I suspect there is going to be some kind of a constitutional crisis. At the very least, there'll be a challenge because the Supreme Court will have to rule, can the president eliminate programs without any input or guidance from Congress? And I suspect the answer to that question is going to be no. And certainly Elon Musk doesn't have the authority to do it.
Some worry courts and Congress can't act fast enough. Take USAID. On Friday, a court blocked an order putting staffers on leave. Yet when employees showed up for work Monday, most returned away. Marcia?
Thank you, Cameron.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Cameron McIntosh in Washington. In Jordan, hundreds of lawyers are gathered outside the parliament in Amman. They are protesting a proposal from U.S. President Donald Trump to move Palestinians from Gaza to Jordan. It's an idea Jordan's King Abdullah has already rejected, but it will likely be the focus when he meets with Trump today at the White House. Trump has already threatened to pull U.S. aid from Jordan if it refuses to resettle Gazans. Nishnawbe First Nation is worried political instability in Ottawa could undermine its efforts to get a new water treatment plant. It has been under a boil water advisory for 3 decades. And leaders of the Ojibwe community in Northern Ontario have been advocating for years to get a permanent fix. Sarah Law has the story.
It has been traumatic for Nishnawbe people. I mean, there's just been so many negative impacts.
Chris Muniz is chief of Nishnawbe First Nation in northwestern Ontario. As of February 1st, the community's 350 members have lacked access to clean drinking water for 3 decades.
Well, it's a lack of political will from the government, so that's the way I feel.
Nearly $30 million in upgrades haven't fixed the problems at the water plant. Muniz says the facility is producing clean water, it's just not getting to people's homes. He says a new plant is the only solution, costing about $52 million. Patty Haidu is the federal minister of Indigenous Services.
About 6 months ago, I provided Niskandiga a commitment to the beginning of thinking about the design of a new plant.
In 2015, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised to end Canada's long-term drinking water advisories in 5 years. A decade later, 33 long-term advisories remain. Now that he's resigned, Muniz questions what happens to that pledge. Engineering professor Carrie Black at the University of Calgary says the issue must be prioritized no matter who's in power.
So stop politicizing it. Stop making it a volleyball that you bat between different political parties.
Muniz says he submitted a project approval request a few weeks ago for a new plant. He's already calling on Canada's next Prime Minister to take quicker action to help his community. Sarah Law, CBC News, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Canada's top musical acts find out today if they're nominated for Juno Awards.
I don't want to die for them to miss me. Yes, I see the things that they wishing on me.
We already know that Boy Wonder will receive the International Achievement Award. The Toronto producer has worked with some of the biggest names in rap, including Drake. The full list of this year's nominees will be announced around midday. The award show will be hosted by Michael Bublé on March 30th in Vancouver. That is the latest from World Report. If you are trying to stay informed and make it a daily habit, you can follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Marcia Young.
Eight 10 a.m. the time right now. It's creaky cold out there, everyone. Minus 27 is the temperature. Thanks for being with us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio, the morning show on CBC. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or you might be on YouTube as well, where all of the shots look like, I'm surprised the camera's still working because it's just frosty out there. It almost looks blue in the overhead roof shot from CBC here this morning. We do have extreme cold at play today, so colder than it's even been before this week, that is. Let's talk about what's coming up this half hour on the program. We're going to hear more from Mark Carney, who was in Winnipeg yesterday, and he was speaking last night at the King's Head, so stay tuned for that. Also this half hour on the program, the usually packed emergency room at Health Sciences Centre cleared out swiftly when a code orange was called during a blizzard last month. A frontline nurse says it was, quote, magical, but where did all the patients go, and what can be learned from coordination that day? The Chief Executive Operating Officer of the Health Sciences Centre joins us this half hour for a live interview to talk about Code Orange and the process. How does that work? Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for other news headlines. She joins us live as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Selkirk's mayor says tariffs could be devastating to his Interlake city. Larry Johansson says more than 500 people in Selkirk work in the steel industry, and most of what they produce goes to the U.S. Manitoba plans to launch a public inquiry into Winnipeg's police headquarters project. The city spent $214 million buying an old Canada Post complex and converting it into the new home for the Winnipeg Police Service. The project going $79 million over budget. A source in the province says a $2 million inquiry will be announced today. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
I'm actually going to go to Corey first before we check the weather with Abby, because Corey's got a couple of things that pertain to school divisions and actually our signal, our transmission signal.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the school divisions here. So a couple things about buses. So letting folks know, due to extreme wind chills, all the buses in Rolling River School Division are canceled today, but the schools are open. All Mountain View School Division buses are canceled due to poor road conditions as well. Schools remain open there. And Brandon School Division buses will not be operating outside the city of Brandon today, and that's all day. So, but all schools are open as well, and buses will be running within the city of Brandon. Also, in terms of just a little bit of housekeeping, Baldy Mountain, we have a tower on there, and there's maintenance happening starting, well, it just started at 8 o'clock today, and it's going to run until about 6 o'clock or so on Thursday. And it's going to affect, you may notice some interruptions if you listen on 105.3 on that transmission. So heads up there, if you listen on 105.3, you may run into some issues there. the next couple of days as crews work on that transmission tower. As for the commute, really been a quiet commute overall today, but if you see something, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully your car started. Here's Abby with the forecast.
Yeah, from Winnipeg all the way to Churchill, the wind chills are dangerously low this morning, making it feel like minus 40 in most of the region. For Winnipeg and surrounding regions, the sun is already up. Temperatures hovering between minus 27 and minus 30 in most of the regions today. Expect the sunny skies to stay with us. We'll see a high of minus 19. As mentioned, the wind chill makes it feel minus 40, 41, 42. Highs would range from minus 19 down south to minus 23 up north, but the wind chill will make it feel colder, so you want to take care.
Well, if you were with us yesterday on the show, then you may have heard a feature interview with a nurse who's worked at Health Sciences Centre for decades, including in the emergency department. CBC News concealed her identity to safeguard her job, but I spoke with her for over an hour about the constantly busy ER and the challenges of being surrounded by, quote, chaos, as she put it. She described beds full of patients, some waiting for transfer to other care facilities, a waiting room with 30 to 60 people in it at times, others on stretchers, lining the ambulance corridor. She also said that the houseless population is so frequently using the waiting room for shelter, she calls some people regulars, and that she probably administers Narcan once a shift, she said, to save patients who might be in an overdose situation. But there was one day last month when all was quiet in the emergency department. Friday, January 17th, the day of a blizzard in our province, when HSC went into code orange to prepare for patients that may be coming in due to traffic accidents. Now, in the end, no one was diverted to HSC, but the nurse says the preparation was, quote, magical.
I was so inspired by the teamwork that I saw, by the people that were coming and taking the patients, and we had so many social workers and transport, like everybody just came to help. We emptied out our department so we could take the new patients that may or may not be coming. And
where did all the people go, though?
I don't know. Some were discharged from our department, the people that were safe to discharge, but they just pulled them up. And I don't know if they pulled them in beds that were closed because they didn't have staff for those beds or what had happened, but it was like, wow.
Did they come back after then, some of the patients?
None of them.
Dr. Sean Young is the Chief Operating Officer of the Health Sciences Centre and has agreed to speak to us specifically about what happens in a code orange situation, although he's bound by some confidentiality regarding the specifics of that day last month. He's here to walk us through things to see what we might glean to improve our system overall. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for being with us. So first of all, when a code orange is called, who calls it and how long, before that call, when that call is made, how long before it actually impacts on the ground what's happening in the hospital?
Well, that's a good question. We have actually two different levels of code orange. There's a code orange alert, which is what was called that day, and then there's a full code orange. And the actions and mechanisms are a little bit different. But the code orange alert, which is what we did, it starts from the EMS group, the emergency services. They'll make the emergency room made aware, and there were a lot of very serious accidents that day, as we know. So we were expecting quite a lot of casualties. HSC is the province's hospital. We are the trauma center, so we have to be able to prepare ourselves for mass casualty events. So we do have mechanisms in place that allow us to clear out as quickly as possible. We start with incident command structure, so I'd be the incident commander, and we'd have operations chiefs, logistics chiefs, planning chiefs. We pull everybody off of their regular work, and we focus on one thing and one thing only, and that's creating capacity. But it's very disruptive to the rest of the site, of course, but it has a significant impact on the emergency department in terms of capacity. Mm-hmm. And what the nurse said, there were two. Magical is one thing I would say, and inspiring is also another thing I would say. It is inspiring to see how quickly people come together to create the capacity that we need when we need it.
She talked about, she was talking, you're talking about the number of different people involved there. She was specifically saying the teamwork involved, social workers and people coming down to make decisions. So all of those people would be already existing in the hospital doing other things. And as you said, you're pulling them out of the departments.
Correct. Yeah. So you're now focused on this one big event to create capacity for mass casualties to be able to support them, get them to the operating rooms, get them to the ICUs, get them to the MRIs and the CT scanners as quickly as possible. All the people doing all that coordination were doing other work already, which was facilitating patient transports, facilitating surgeries, and all that gets deferred. So we do impact a lot of patients as a result of these code oranges, but it is ultimately to create a safe pathway for mass trauma or mass casualty events.
I just wonder if there's lessons to be learned, though, because to move people that swiftly somewhere also was something that happened. So where did all the patients go? She was suggesting that maybe they went into, because there's not enough beds. We know this. So she said there are some wards that are shuttered because there's not enough staff to cover those wards. She wondered whether or not maybe the patients went to those beds just on a temporary basis or somehow. Can you, in a code orange, where do you move everyone physically?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, they didn't go to those wards per se, but what we can do is add other patients to an existing ward. We pull patients up into recovery rooms, for instance. We pull them up into non-traditional areas to be able to create that capacity. But it's very limited in its span because you can't do that indefinitely because we're already at almost 100% capacity daily. Ideally, a hospital wants to be 85-90% capacity so that you do have the ability to surge into those areas when you do need to quickly, as in a code orange or a code orange alert. But we've been really struggling with capacity over the last 4 or 5 years, as you know.
What about those who would have been in beds for longer stays? Because we learned that, sometimes there's stroke patients that end up presenting to ER, they're lower acuity, but they end up sort of stuck there because they can't get space somewhere else. I'm just curious if somebody was in an ER during a code orange in that situation, where would they go? Because the nurse said also that, at least on this day in January, no one came back to the ER.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question because there's things that we do as a site internally that we can do to create capacity very quickly. But then there's things that others can do to help us. So when we do call out a code orange, it's often a system response. It's not just the Health Sciences Center or the ERS system. So we make our other partners aware, other hospitals aware. When we look at some of our longest stays of admitted patients in the emergency departments that were quoted, I mean, these are the patients that were not waiting for a bed at the Health Sciences Center. They're waiting for a bed at one of the other lower acuity hospitals.
Yeah, someone for 300 days, the nurse was sharing, was the longest stay she recalled. 300 days in ER.
Yeah, we've had some of those patients a week longer. Yep. They're not often, but it's disturbing enough. I mean, we don't want anybody waiting that long, but that's where your dependency on some of the other facilities comes into play. So when we call that code, we can actually sometimes get those patients into those facilities.
And what about if someone were there just for shelter or warmth? Would they be discharged in a code orange situation? Because it was also, it was quite, I'm going to use the word illuminating to understand that she said sometimes there'll be no one, she said 30 people could be in there and it could be all people there for shelter or warmth. So I'm just curious what the code orange is for that when you know that perhaps someone is not there for immediate medical attention.
Those patients aren't as directly impacted because it's more about clearing space in beds and in diagnostic areas and resuscitation bays and ICUs and surgery. It's not as much about people in the waiting room waiting for lower acuity care. We've seen such an increase in volumes of homeless and housing insecure people at the Health Sciences over the last 5 years. We've been measuring that. We've been presenting that to government as well in terms of how it's impacting the emergency department and the wait times and some of the safety events as well. So we've been working with our shelters to try and find out what it is that we need to be able to better support some of these folks that are coming 50 or 100 times a year to the emergency department. But that's ongoing work, but we are seeing a considerable increase in those volumes.
What do you do with that, though, in a code orange day? Then she said some people would have been discharged from ER. Might that have been an example of someone with a lower acuity, and perhaps you suspected through conversation they were actually there more for shelter?
Yeah, they could. They probably had more social workers in there to be able to better link the people that needed different supports into the community back with the shelters. We did call in a lot of social workers directly into the ED to help match those needs.
So obviously, Dr. Young, all of this is leading us to wonder, you're talking about coordination, that the transfers happen swiftly in a code orange, that it is a system-wide response among hospitals, not just one space, not just HSC. What can be applied on a day-to-day basis that might help with the challenges that have been outlined?
Well, that's a really good question, too, because, I mean, Code Orange is one extreme example of what we can do to create capacity quickly. But we have surge protocols as well that are less extreme. They don't impact people's elective surgeries or cancer surgeries or things like that a Code Orange can. So we do have Code Orange protocols that we've recently expanded or expanding to 24/7. We've been running them during the day when all hands are on deck and managers and CRNs are all around. So we have been able to create a different type of surge to create capacity. It's not nearly as effective as a Code Orange because you're not disrupting nearly as many other patients. But it is one ability for us to create some capacity, in particular for the resuscitation beds. We have the Health Sciences Center. At the Trauma Center, we've got 6 resuscitation beds that are the most critical beds in the entire province to protect. And when those beds get full, that's when we start to get worried and start calling surges.
If clearing out the ER that swiftly, might not be achievable day to day because you don't have the staff, what does the actual staff number look like to make it achievable, like you were talking about, or does it lie, in your opinion, more in coordination of the system?
It's all coordination. Yeah, this is not about the number of people. You're pulling people that are already there off of different work to be able to help facilitate this. We don't have the ability to have a lot of extra people kind of hanging around waiting for an event like this. So you're pulling people off of other activities regularly when you're surging, but particularly the Code Orange is very disruptive.
What gets in the way from I'm just especially interested in the longer term stay folks in the ER that you said were, able to be moved pretty swiftly on in a Code Orange situation to other facilities because you have that system-wide coordination. Why doesn't that happen on sort of more of a day-to-day basis?
Well, those sites are struggling as well with capacity, so they're full, and we want to be able to get those lower acuity patients to them much quicker. But when they're full and there isn't capacity, then they have to get creative with their capacity when we have to move them quickly, as in a Code Orange, which they would have. Sometimes it means putting them in the emergency department or their urgent cares. But they're full as well. We're all struggling with the same challenges with a lot of patients in hospitals that we can't get them into their next phase of treatment, whether it's rehab or long-term care or home care. So all our hospitals are quite full of patients that don't actually need a hospital anymore. We call them ALCs, alternate level of care. And that number is not getting better, and that's a concern. So we do definitely need those services beyond the hospital to be beefed up.
What should I ask the Premier next week about this?
Oh, I think our biggest challenge, our staffing has been getting a little bit better. We've hired over 200 nurses over the last 2 years. That trend is getting better, same with allied health. I think our biggest challenge right now that the government can help us with is helping us with the home care, the long-term care. What is causing us the access block and the alternate level of care numbers to be so high? There's 25% of the patients at a health science center that have been there for over a month, many over 2 months, that need those facilities to be opened. So that's one big way they can help. And another big way they can help is better supports for the sheltered population so that they don't need an emergency room to be able to support their needs.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Marcy.
That is Dr. Sean Young, Chief Operating Officer of the Health Sciences Centre. So next week, the Premier will be on our show for a regular monthly interview to speak about some of the other frontline challenges that have been shared with CBC. If you missed that feature interview with the nurse, by the way, that we were referring to, you can find it on our website, and it is our full podcast from yesterday, and it's on YouTube as well. It is 8:27 a.m. A quick turn to politics now. Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney was at the King's Head pub in Winnipeg last night. He was responding to President Donald Trump's new tariffs, among other things. Here's a bit of what he said.
We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis not of our own making, but we are in a crisis where the solution is to build this economy. We are in a crisis where the solution is in our hands. We're masters of our own economic destiny, and we're going to take it to them. I want to look back for a moment over why I think America is doing what they're doing. I think that the Americans forgot about the middle class. I think the Americans forgot about the need to provide health care to all their citizens. I think the Americans built a social safety net with enormous holes in it that tens of millions of people fell through. The Americans worshipped at the altar of the market, and the gains were not spread across that society, and now there's a backlash. Now there's a backlash, and that backlash is leading to them pushing out against us. When you think about what's at stake in this ridiculous, insulting comments of the president of what we could be. This is by the way, I view this as the sort of Voldemort of comments. Like, I will not even repeat it, but you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. And what's at stake for us? This country, Canada, this great country, it's a mosaic. I look out at this crowd. It is a mosaic. It is one of our strengths. We have distinct identities as part of a common nationality. America has a melting pot. Where's the place for First Nations in America? Where's the place for a French language in America? Where's the place for healthcare that serves everyone equally in America? There's no place for any of those things because they don't care. America is not Canada. Canada will never, ever, in any way, shape, or form, be part of America. And you know, question then is qu'est-ce qu'on fait? What are we going to do about it? Because if the U.S. follows through with these tariff threats, if we're not able to come to some arrangement, it is going to be a hit to our economy. It's going to be a hit to the Manitoba economy. The great many businesses here, small, medium-sized businesses that people have built up over the years, many of whom export to the United States. We are going to diversify our trading partners because we have options. We have what the world wants. We have the smartest people. We have the best resources. We don't need the Americans. They need us. They need us.
That is Mark Carney speaking last night in Winnipeg. He was talking to several hundred of his supporters at the King's Head pub last night. He is running, of course, for Liberal leader. There are 5 candidates in the race. Members of the Liberal Party will select a new leader at the start of next month. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's minus 28 right now in Winnipeg. It is a chilly one. Layer up, Winnipeg. Sunny today, a high of minus 19, but this morning the wind chill close to minus 40. Southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, under extreme cold warning this morning. The mayor of Selkirk says his Interlake City is bracing for the U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum. More than 500 people are employed in the steel industry in Selkirk. Mayor Larry Johansson says more than 70% of the steel produced in his city goes to the U.S. Johansson says the tariffs would be devastating.
It's not good. We've seen this in 2018, and it seems like we're reliving Groundhog Day by going through this again. We are not only Selkirk steel mill, but we're Manitoba steel mill.
Johansson says when the U.S. imposed steel tariffs under the first Trump administration, their Gerdau steel mill did not lay anyone off, but he's not sure how it could weather tariffs this time around. The Prairie Regional Vice President for the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters says tariffs proposed by the U.S. are unacceptable, unjustified, and could be devastating on both sides of the border. Terry Shaw says for decades, Canadian and American manufacturing has been intertwined. He says for the past several weeks, his members have been meeting to discuss strategies to deal with the uncertainties.
How can we best support our manufacturing members right now? We're doing that by bringing them together weekly. We're doing that by having conversations like this publicly to get Manitobans, Canadians, and hopefully Americans across the border understanding just how negative these tariffs are.
Shaw says they will also bring in members of their American counterparts, the National Association of Manufacturers, into the conversation. Manitoba plans to launch a public inquiry into Winnipeg's police headquarters project. The city has spent $214 million buying an old Canada Post complex and converting it into a home for the Winnipeg Police Service. The project went $79 million over budget. It also prompted 2 audits, an RCMP investigation, and a pair of lawsuits. City Council had asked the province to launch a public inquiry into that project in 2017. A source in the Canoe government says a $2 million inquiry will be announced today. The source says lawyer Garth Smorang will serve as commissioner. A Winnipeg towing company is suing the city and its deputy mayor, alleging they reneged on a contract. Tartan Towing had won a contract to tow Winnipeg police vehicles last August. A few months later, after Deputy Mayor Janice Lukes raised questions, the city announced it would reopen that contract to new bids. Tartan claims the city unilaterally refused to negotiate with the company. It claims Lukes encouraged the breach with defamatory comments made in media. The company launched 2 other lawsuits naming Lukes last year. Luke says she would not comment on this third lawsuit, but says it's her job to ensure taxpayers are getting value for their tax dollars. The city of Winnipeg declined to comment while the matter is ongoing. None of the claims have been tested in court. First Nations children and families harmed by Canada's on-reserve child welfare system can soon apply for compensation as part of a class action settlement. It's for children and families who experienced racial discrimination through Ottawa's chronic underfunding of the First Nations Child and Family Services program. People who were removed from their families and reserves between 1991 and 2022 and placed in Child and Family Services can begin applying as early as next month. Advocates for First Nation families say compensation is an important step forward. Mary Burton is at Zungizi O'Day, a group that works with Indigenous youth and families in Winnipeg.
Of course, this isn't going to take care of all the hurt and trauma that was suffered, but it's going to help families who are struggling and help them get the help that they need in order to live a better life.
The $23 billion class action is the largest ever in Canada. Northern Manitoba will soon be getting more bus service. NCN Thompson Bus Lines has announced a new route connecting Winnipeg with 5 communities, including Flin Flon, The Pas, Swan River, and Dauphin. Jimmy Pelk at NCN Thompson Bus Line says the new route is a win for the company and the communities.
We had 1 employee and 1 bus 6.5 years ago. Today, we have 12 buses, 27 employees, and now we have a building here in The Pas and 10 more jobs created.
The region did have bus service from Winnipeg, but it shut down last year. This new service includes an overnight passenger service and a daytime freight service. Starting this spring, it will operate 7 days a week. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks for the morning, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Walls, Alana Cole, Megan Ketcherson in our news center this morning. Big thanks to them. Thanks to the people that worked in our unit directly on this morning's program. They are associate reporter Gavin Axelrod, reporter Jim Agapito, associate producer Kalkadan Mulugeta, associate producer Chidi Akuma, producer Robin Summerfield, who is producing the programs in unit this week, and Leif Larson, who is the executive producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. It is now coming up to the end of the show. Corey, what do you want to say?
If you listen on our 105.3 frequency, just a heads up, we're doing some repairs on our Baldy Mountain Tower, and that means you may experience some disruptions over the next couple of days until Thursday at about 6 o'clock or so. So heads up, 105.3 might be spotty at times as we do some repairs.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Abby.
It's dangerously cold across the province.
Yeah,
Though some people are used to the cold and they tell you it's mild, but I think it's dangerously cold with the numbers I'm seeing this morning. We're looking at highs between 19 and 23, 35 in most of the areas. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at minus 28. Clear skies. We're seeing expect some sunny conditions, and this dangerously chill weather is going to be staying with us for most of the day.
No doubt. All right. Thanks, Abby. So it's a bundle up kind of Tuesday. Thank you for starting your morning with us on Information Radio here on CBC. On behalf of our whole team, I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, be well, stay warm. We'll talk to you again tomorrow here on the show. The Currents coming up next on CBC.